Good morning and welcome to Cradle-to-Career's Data and Tools Advisory Board meeting. We'll get started in one moment. Please just give us a second to work some behind the scenes magic. Thank you for all that are here. Wonderful. Thank you so much. We're very excited today. Good morning and welcome. I know I just said this, but welcome to Cradle-to-Career's Data and Tools Advisory Board meeting. My name is Mary Kate Cruz Jones. I'm the Chief of Strategic Initiatives and Partnerships here at Cradle-to-Career. Today's meeting will be a hybrid meeting. We have folks joining us throughout the state of California, as well as some folks here operating out of our home center, which is at 400 R Street in Sacramento. So I want to welcome and thank all members of the public who have joined us, as well as many of our advisory board members and our staff. Before we begin, members, please ensure that your camera remains on throughout the duration of the meeting. Now, why? We need to be in compliance with the requirements set forth in the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act, and we wanted to share this transparently with the public. So if at any moment, members, you need to step away from your camera or turn it off, that's fine. Please just let us and the public know, and you can turn off your camera and go about your business. If you feel like you can't share it in the moment, please just reach out to myself and staff, and we can voice that over for you. Now, we have some folks with us here today. We have some translation services that are being offered. So thank you so much to Aldo and Mark. We are so happy that you could be with us. If you'd like to listen to the comments in Spanish, please select the More option at the bottom of the screen that says Interpretation, and then the language interpretation and your language, and we're offering Spanish. You will then hear a live rendering of the comments in Spanish, and I will pause for a moment for our Spanish interpreter to translate. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mary Kate. We'll do the same for the benefit of our Spanish listening audience. Muy buenos días. Si desea usted escuchar la reunión en español, por favor busque en la parte inferior de su pantalla el icono de un globo terráqueo que dice Interpretation o Interpretación. Selecciónelo y de ahí seleccione su idioma Spanish o español. Y así podrá escuchar el programa enteramente en su idioma. Thank you, Mary Kate. Back to you.
Wonderful. For all members speaking today, we ask that you introduce yourself and say your job title or affiliation. And please say your name slowly and then pause briefly before proceeding with your comments. I'd love to model this now. Mary Kate Cruz Jones, Chief of Strategic Initiatives and Partnerships. And we might get some reminders during the day that we're speaking too quickly. That's okay. We'll just try and slow it down. Brilliant. Next, I'd love to start the land acknowledgement. As we begin today, we acknowledge that this virtual meeting is taking place throughout the unceded territory of California, home to nearly 200 tribal nations. As I noted, I'm joining you today from Sacramento, the traditional land of the Maidu, Miwok, and Nisenan people, whose presence, past, present, and future we honor and respect. I'd like to pause for a moment for us to reflect. We recognize that the ancestral land on which we are collectively gathered and our responsibility to support and foster learning through the dissemination of knowledge consistent with the Cradle-to-Career data system's work to advance equity. We hope this acknowledgement encourages individuals to think about what it means to occupy space on Indigenous lands, and we invite everyone to learn more about the ancestral lands on which they reside. And we've linked it, nativeland.ca. All right, for folks that are following along in today's meeting, as I noted at the top, we will be running this in accordance with the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act. Today we have 9 items in front of us on the agenda, and all companion materials are posted on the Cradle-to-Career website. For members of the public that are following along, we provided you with a visual and the website link where you can find the materials and Have at it. For members of the public, I also wanted to call out that we will be referencing two member feedback documents. Those also are linked on our website. You'll hear that during agenda items 4 and 5. So feel free to start scavenging and getting yourself ready because we will be referencing them quite a bit. The member feedback document link will be effective through today, close of business, which is 5 p.m. Also, as we're touching on public engagement, I'd like to thank the folks that sent in the 2 written comments that we received prior to today's meeting. They have been shared with our advisory board members. So thank you for the participation even before we got started. I would like to thank Data and Tools members for joining me in our first meeting of 2026. We have a very full and engaging agenda ahead of us. Members already did a hearty amount of homework, as noted in the member feedback document, so there's much to dig into. Just to brace folks, I want to share that we have one break, and that break will hopefully happen around 12:25 p.m. So hopefully folks are rearing to go, and we hope to adjourn the meeting at about 2 p.m. in case a timeline is helpful as we get things started. Now, I would like to officially call this meeting to order at 10:06 a.m., and I'd love to pass it to my colleague, Stephanie Gutierrez Valdez, to please call the roll.
Thank you. Member Catanzarite? Member Shuck?
Present.
Member Harlick? Member Khanna?
Present.
Member Mehta?
Present.
Member Milan?
Present.
Member Norris? Member Norris?
Present.
Member Ortiz Vilar?
Present.
Member Fong?
Present.
Member Reed?
Present.
Member Shack?
Present.
Member Schmidt-Temple?
Present.
Member Tarasova?
Present.
Member Unda?
Present.
Member Watson?
Present.
Member Yi?
Present.
For the clarity of the record, we have 14 members present. We have a quorum.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Okay, we will now move on to agenda item 2, approval of the Data and Tools Advisory Board consent calendar. This is our one item up for vote today. Members, you may recall that matters on the consent calendar are routine in nature and are approved by a single vote. Prior to any action by the Data and Tools Advisory Board, members and the public will be given the opportunity to remove any item from the consent calendar. Items removed from the consent calendar may be heard immediately following the approval of the consent calendar or set aside until later in the day. So, what we have in front of us is noted here, and that's the approval of the October 3 minutes. That's when y'all last convened. Am I hearing any objections? Fabulous. I'm seeing shaking heads saying no, so let's go for it. What I would love now is to hear a motion to approve these meeting minutes.
Moved by Member Tarasova.
Okay, I have a motion. May I have a second, please?
Second by Renee Maida.
Motion and a second. Thank you, both members. Before we vote, let's pause for public comment. Stephanie Gutierrez Valdez, please take this over. I would also like to confirm that I don't have any speaker slips for here in Sacramento, so I believe we'd just be taking it to our virtual commenters.
Correct. Yes. For members of the public attending via Zoom, please raise your hand if you'd like to comment on the consent calendar. Okay. Seeing none, that closes the public comment period.
With the public comment period closed, this means we could go straight to a vote. So please, Stephanie Gutierrez Valdez, walk us through that.
Member Catanzarite? Member Shuck?
Yes.
Member Harlick? Member Khanna?
Yes.
Member Mehta?
Yes.
Member Milan?
Yes.
Member Norris?
Yes.
Member Ortiz Villar,
Yes.
Member Fong,
Yes.
Member Reed,
Yes.
Member Shack, Member
Yes.
Shack. Thank you. Member Schmidt Temple,
Yes.
Member Tarasova,
Yes.
Member Unda,
Yes.
Member Watson,
Yes.
Member Yi.
Yes.
For the clarity of the record, we have 14 ayes.
Brilliant. With 14 ayes, the motion passes. Thank you for approving those meeting minutes. That's wonderful. Okay, I'd love for us to transition to next is agenda item 3. That is an update on the Office of Cradle-to-Career, and it's going to be presented in 2 parts. So first, we're going to hear from our Executive Director, Marianne Bates. And Marianne, please take it away.
Thank you so much. It's great to see all of you this morning. If we can go to the next slide. So I'm going to focus on a couple of things. One is a reflection on accomplishments from last year, a bit of a look ahead on what we're doing in 2026. Then I want to talk about learning agendas and open science. These are topics that our governing board has really been grappling with over their past few meetings. So I want to get you up to speed on that, and then think about the impact of your proposal process and the work that you're doing here. Next slide. Okay, so let's start with 2025. Next slide. As you know, in 2025, for the first time, the public could see and touch the data tools built from the underlying linked data. So the hard work that our team has been doing and our data partners have been doing to build the underlying linked longitudinal data set became tangible. Next slide, please. So this was the Student Pathways data story. You're familiar with it. It's on our website. We really focused on user-centered design and listening to people. As we've talked about before, the #1 most requested feature was the ability to disaggregate the data, both by geography and by student demographics and experiences. So each picture has 9,000 cuts of data behind it. And the privacy and security is woven in there too. As you zoom in farther and farther, eventually some of the arms of this visual or some of the data points are blurred if there are too few people in that group. So it's a great example of how we were able to balance people's desire to be able to see this for their own community and protecting privacy. And last year, more than 75,000 people visited the dashboard from the time we released it in April through the end of the calendar year. So we're really pleased with how people have been tapping into it. Next slide. And as you know, as soon as we released the dashboard, people started asking us, can you please release the underlying data as well? We don't want to click download 9,000 times on each of those pictures. And so we did, and that was Query Builder 1.0. We released that in the early fall in response to requests from the community. And as you know, we also got your input and input from the community on how to do that. So think of the Query Builder as essentially being a few neat and tidy CSV files where you have all the same data that powers the dashboard available for use. And if we can go to the next slide, one of the things I think is really neat about this is just a screenshot of some of the visualizations our team found that others have made using those files. So these visuals, you can see some from PPIC, some from advisory board members, and they're asking different questions from the ones that our dashboard asked, but it's the same underlying data. And this is exactly the usefulness of why we're doing this work. Cradle-to-Career's work is all about making it easier for people to access the data and use it to answer the questions that are a priority for them. Next slide. Okay. I want to zoom in on some of the work we've been doing that's not externally visible, because I think it's really important to lift that up and celebrate it too. So at the heart of what we're doing, we're building this linked longitudinal data set, and no one can touch and feel that, right? That's the underlying data set. These data tools like the dashboard are then built on top of that. But the strength of that underlying data set really determines how well we can build things, how nimble we can be in the future. So over the last months, we've had this great partnership with the Office of Data and Innovation. That's another entity here at the state that's been doing really great things in partnership with many different departments. And what we were a part of is what they call their Modern Data Stack Accelerator. And it's basically about building a stronger underlying foundation for the data system so that we can be more flexible for custom queries and we can have a scalable system for cutting data reports. Next slide. So what does that look like in practice? Some of the outcomes for this project are continuous integration, reducing development cycles and time to delivery, continuous delivery, reducing the need for manual deployments, data migrations, and schema changes, improved automation and documentation, reducing onboarding time for new users, improved version control to create a historical record of changes, allowing rollbacks and audits. So the bottom line on all of that is that this is work our team has been doing to make sure that the data system is more scalable, more flexible, more efficient, and traceable. Okay, now let's do an update on some of our work with partners. You've heard about the work of California Colleges.edu. The main update since your last meeting is their reach. So as of January of this year, CCGI has signed partner district agreements with LEAs covering 95% of California public high school students. That now includes LAUSD, many of the other large districts and smaller districts as well. And this is important because it's that partnership with the individual LEAs that enables the transcript-informed accounts at CCGI that provide information to the students, to their guidance counselors on where they are in their A to G journey and which classes they've finished. So that's an exciting update that now the legal agreements are in place for that, and they continue to work to get to scale with all of those partners. And as you also know, they have an ongoing partnership with the California Department of Education to provide basic accounts to all 6th through 12th grade students, even in districts that have not yet partnered. So students can still take the financial aid lessons, launch their applications, and all of that through the portal, even if they don't yet have transcript-informed accounts. All right, e-transcript and career passport. Cradle-to-Career continues to work closely with the Community College Chancellor's Office by convening state entities and assisting with the planning for the initial phase of the career passport. And we also conducted a landscape scan and interviewed state implementers across the country to capture themes and key learnings across the country for the career passport, similar concepts. So learner employer records, digital wallets, those kinds of things. So we continue to be excited about the progress there. And we continue our role in gathering intersegmental feedback from the other higher education partners and other stakeholders for developing the e-transcript and career passport work and procurement. I will mention just about over a week ago, the community colleges through their digital center in partnership with one of their local districts released an RFP for the revamped e-transcript platform. So you can find that on Planet Bids. And we're excited about the progress that our partners at the Chancellor's Office are making on this project. All right, now I want to talk about the idea of listening first, then building. This is one of these things I write on a Post-it note I keep on my monitor. It's how we do the work. We try to make sure we're listening first to people before we build dashboards and other things. One of the ways we listen is through what is called a student experience report. So if you read the Cradle-to-Career Data System Act in our section of state law, there's a part in it that charges our office with conducting an annual audit on students' experiences transitioning from secondary to higher education. So we call this our annual student experience report. And the one we just completed for last year really looks at supporting the scaling, expanding, and operating and maintenance of the practical tools that we work on with our partners. So the student experience report has remained consistent. We do one each year, but we've slightly shifted and adapted how we do this report year over year. Next slide. For this year, we partnered with the UC Davis California Education Lab and with the California Student Aid Commission. And the report was released just in February. And we had a community conversation on February 4th that people participated in, and they provided really valuable feedback and insights on it. If you missed the community conversation, like all of our meetings, it's available on our YouTube channel and on the meetings section of our website. Next slide. So the community conversations continue to be a pillar of our work at Cradle to Career, and that the public relies on and looks forward to and looks as an opportunity to engage with our team in a much more informal setting than these Bagley Keene meetings that you have. So it's a Zoom call. People can interact and answer questions in those calls. And we heard some really interesting things from that community conversation. People are interested in learning about students' preferences for in-person versus online courses. They want to know more about the impact of outside factors like the immigration climate and economic landscape in college selection. They wanted to know more about how disability status influences students' transition into higher education. And so some of our next steps include reflecting on the findings and planning for the upcoming annual student experience report. And one specific thing we're also really looking forward to is some of the questions we asked this year in that survey that we did jointly with the Student Aid Commission really focused on the process of transferring and the experience of transfer students. And we put those questions in there because we knew that this year we would be designing our transfers dashboard. And so that's a great way for us to make sure that we've heard from students and heard their perspective as we designed that. Okay, let's look ahead to what's in store for this year. Next slide, please. Okay, reminder, you're not supposed to read what's on this page. It's too tiny, but remember that each year our governing board votes on and approves a work plan for our office, and that's available on the resources section of our website. There's a page for each area of our work that details exactly what we outlined as our plan for the year. This is important because, as you know, we are a small but mighty team. And so we really need to be thoughtful about what we're prioritizing each year, and we try to be super transparent about it. So you know, here's what we're working on this year. Next slide, please. These are the next two pages of the work plan. Next slide. Okay. One of the things that was in our work plan for last year and is in our work plan for this year is the workforce data expansion. This is the largest and most complex expansion of the data system to date. And I'll tell you a bit about how this came about. It's really the clear governance structure that Cradle to Career has that enabled rapid collaboration on the biggest expansion to date for the data system. The data from this from our partners will really help tell the story of nonlinear paths. So stories that reach beyond high school completion and going to college, stories of how people do workforce training or apprenticeships. And that really complements the college pathways that you can currently see in the student pathways dashboard. So we're really excited about this data coming into the data system. Next slide. So the comprehensive linked workforce data will tell a more nuanced story, not just who went through a program, but the context they bring to it. So again, what's really unique about the work we can do at Cradle to Career is we can show the whole path. So you know who's finished high school and when did they finish high school? Was there a long gap? Had they done some college or completed college before doing a workforce training program? Are people pivoting careers? Things like that. So this variation in the different experiences that people have in the workforce space will really need to be captured in the data and harmonized for data visualizations. Next slide. And I'll just highlight the wide variation of programs. And those of you who work in higher education might disagree with me on this point, but I'll just oversimplify for a moment. In higher education, there is a lot of standardization. Obviously, there's a million different majors you can do, and your experience will vary by college. But at the end of the day, an associate's degree is an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree is a bachelor's degree, a 3-credit hour, 4-credit hour course is a standardized thing. Workforce training programs can be really short, just a couple weeks long. They can be longer. They can be intense. They can be lighter touch. They can be really hands-on. So there's a huge variation. I mention all of that because that has implications for what it means to bring the data together and what it will take to take the nuanced and variable data that we get from the data partners on this and turn that into understandable data visualizations. Next slide. So one of the things we may start by is by starting to release some early descriptive statistics, just basic information on how many people are in the workforce data in comparison to the education data. And the bottom line I just want to be really transparent about is this data is coming to us for the first time this month in March. It's going to take a significant amount of work and time with our partners to convert that ingested data into intuitive visualizations and tools that people can use. So we're really excited about this data expansion. And I also want to calibrate expectations that this is going to be a major lift and a more challenging lift than what we've done to date on the K-12 and higher education data. One thing I do want to be really clear with the public about is that the workforce data expansion will dramatically increase the insights we can share on those experiences in the workforce that people have. And yet there will still be some questions that the state's data can't answer. So just as an example, currently employers do not report the following information to the state, to our partners at EDD who collect this and who collect the earnings data more broadly that feeds into the data system. So for example, employers currently don't report number of hours worked, job type, or location of work. Employers report quarterly the total amount that someone earned. So you can see an individual earned X amount in Q1 of this year, but you don't know how many hours they worked or what their wages are. So it's hard to have a nuanced understanding of what people's hourly wages are because you don't know, are they working a ton of hours to get to that amount, or are they higher paid and working fewer hours? So I think it's important for people to have that context because this constrains the state's understanding of wages, wage growth, and even paths across different job types. So we know industry of occupation, but we don't know job type. So you know if someone's in transportation, but you don't know, are they driving the truck or are they answering the phone in the office? That sort of thing. If you want further context on that, I link here to a brief by an organization called Strata Foundation that has put out some information on that. For this expansion, going back to the story of our governance structure and the usefulness of having clearly written down and authority and statute and in our legal agreements around how data points can be added to the data system, how decisions around that get made. This was an incredibly smooth and quick process. So it was just over a year ago that Secretary Knox, the Secretary of the Labor Agency here in California, wrote a memo to us at Cradle-to-Career where he outlined the key questions they want to answer that they cannot answer with their own data, but that they could answer when linked with the other data that Cradle-to-Career brings together. And I've often talked about that memo as being like a miniature learning agenda, and that you can think of a learning agenda as being sort of like a research agenda. It prioritizes the key questions that need to be answered, and it sort of spells out the why, right? Our data partners at LWDA put in a ton of work to prepare the data over the last 6 months. Our team is putting a lot of effort in. Why are we doing that? Because there are some key questions around what's the impact of different workforce training programs, for instance, that we can only answer when this data is brought together. So it was really helpful to have that why spelled out clearly in a learning agenda. And then our technical teams were able to collaborate and our legal teams worked together with that same goal in mind. Next slide, please. The next thing I'm excited to tell you about that we're working on this year is the new C2C Secure Data Enclave. Next slide. So we're creating a data enclave right now and developing a process that will ensure we have a functional, scalable process with the infrastructure and agreed upon legal templates in place before we open up the process more broadly. So think of 2026 as being the year that we're building an enclave, and then we start to pilot it in small ways before it's opened up more broadly. So we're going to initially pilot the Secure Data Enclave with the California Policy Lab at UC. We have a contract with them already, and they have run a secure enclave of their own for many years. And so that's a partner we wanted to work with to make sure we learn from them and make sure that the enclave is working smoothly. And we are working on piloting the enclave to understand 3 main things. One is the implementation of the computing environment and trying that out and making sure that's running smoothly. The implementation of the legal framework because when studies are done with underlying data, our data partners approve those individual studies and researchers sign a legal agreement with them, and then actually conducting some pilot research studies. Once the operation of the C2C enclave is smooth through that piloting, we're going to pilot the research data request process with additional research teams who have contracts to provide technical assistance to C2C. So we're going to do this in phases so that we make sure everything is running smoothly, as opposed to opening the process initially, being flooded with requests, and not having ironed out all of those details. So this will be a phased approach. Next slide. I'm happy to share that we procured the NORC platform for the enclave. This is a platform created by the University of Chicago. It's a leading industry standard. They've managed sensitive government data in enclaves for 20 years. And we made a strategic choice to procure an existing platform instead of building our own custom enclave from scratch. And this enables us to do a couple of things. One is we can leverage the existing infrastructure, security, and functionality of NORC. We can leverage their customer service support and processes for things like disclosure avoidance support. And we can maintain an ambitious timeline for piloting those pilot studies in this year. So if you want to learn more about NORC and their platform, we have a link here as well. One more thought on this, actually, before we go on to strategic planning. If you're unfamiliar with a secure enclave, the way I like to think about it is that it's a secure sandbox that enables research to be done in our controlled environment. And then the insights and what's learned from that analysis leaves the enclave, but the data stays put. So it's a way to enable research with the underlying data in a very privacy protecting and secure manner. And my hope with this is that as we build this out in the coming months and years, we can really create a much more smooth process for our data providers and for the research community to access data within the enclave. So that's one of the things we're most excited to work on in 2026, and we'll keep you updated about the progress. All right, now we'll go on to talk about strategic planning. As you may know, our board approves a strategic plan for the office. And as they're engaging in that process right now, they've had conversations about the strategic plan at their November meeting and at their February meeting. They're going to vote on the strategic plan at their May meeting. And stakeholder engagement really shaped the strategic planning process, including the goals and objectives. And the input focused on how C2C can remain useful to the people of California, the people who are using the data tools, how improvements can be made to data tools and resources, and how to make them really user-friendly and accessible. As we work on the strategic plan with the board, we started by anchoring the process and looking at our mission and vision. So I just want to revisit this. Both the mission and vision are drawn very closely from the language and statute that describes our purpose. So C2C's mission is to be California's source of actionable data and research on education, economic, and health outcomes for individuals, families, and communities, to expand access to tools and services to navigate the education to employment pipeline. So there's a lot in there, but it's all about bringing information together across silos so it really helps people as they navigate education to employment. Next slide. And the vision is the Cradle-to-Career data system connects individuals and organizations with trusted information and resources, providing insights into critical milestones in the pipeline from early care to K-12 to higher education, skills training, and employment. And it empowers individuals to reach their full potential and fosters evidence-based decision-making to help California build a more equitable future. Next slide. The other aspect that we're really weaving in through the strategic plan and that the board has been really good at lifting up is the C2C values. So advancing equity, transparency, accountability, collaboration, and curiosity. And we've really found that when the work becomes extra challenging, leaning on these values, especially transparency and curiosity, is really important for enabling us to do the work well. Next slide. So there are a number of organization-wide goals that are reflected in the draft strategic plan that the board discussed in February. You can look at the whole document if you look at the meeting materials for February. And the high-level goals are to be California's neutral source of trusted information, to be accessible to California's communities, to release a steady drumbeat of useful and necessary data and data tools, to build infrastructure for insights at scale, and to optimize organizational and operational culture. And these goals provide some of the themes that you'll see represented in the strategic plan. And one thing that I want to make sure I highlight is that this strategic plan is different from the annual work plan. It's a 5-year strategic plan. So it's really about the big picture. It's about how we do the work, but it's not trying to predict exactly what we're going to do in 2031 in that given year. That's where the annual work plan comes in each year that the board approves. Okay, learning agendas and open science. Let's go to the next slide. What are learning agendas? Learning agendas focus attention and activities on research and evidence needed to solve big problems. Essentially, it lets, whether it's a government entity or an organization, it's a mechanism to prioritize the key questions that need to be answered so that that can propel coordinated research and ensure that results in informed decision making. And how might we use a learning agenda? We can, at C2C, we can use these to elevate key questions that our communities are prioritizing the most. We could use it to prioritize external research data requests. We can use them to prioritize which new data points to pursue or not, right? Lead collaborations between state entities and external researchers, and we can even leverage our partners' learning agendas to help prioritize which data, tools, and reports to create. The big picture, think of a learning agenda as a means to prioritize what we do. For example, last year and this year, we're prioritizing the workforce data. There are other ideas that people are bringing to the table for, new data that we wish we could have included this year, but right now the focus is workforce data. So having a clear learning agenda and a reason for why we're prioritizing one thing now versus other things later can help provide clarity into the strategy and how we're doing the work. Next slide. When might we create a learning agenda? This is referenced in the draft strategic plan as a potential activity for future years. And I also want to highlight, if you're interested in this, take a look at the presentation that Amira Boland presented at the February Governing Board meeting. She was previously a civil servant at the White House Office of Management and Budget for many years and led many of the federal government's efforts around evidence and learning agendas. So if you're interested in learning more about this, check out that presentation. In the February meeting, some of our board members made a few comments that are relevant to your work, so I want to lift them up. Vice Chair Tagorda said, I see a potential connection between a learning agenda and the work of our advisory boards. Often our advisory boards come up with many fantastic ideas that can't be operationalized right away or may not necessarily fit within the context of our strategic plan, but certainly warrants location in and prominence in a learning agenda for exploration, consideration, and for future discussion in a place where it's publicly visible. Next slide. And Member Evans said, this is a great example of how a learning agenda occupies that space between the 5-year strategic plan and the longer range objectives and work that the governing board and advisory board have to navigate on a regular basis. So there was some interesting discussion around this that connects to your work, and I wanted to lift that up. Open science and transparency. If you're familiar with open science, the idea behind it is to provide opportunities for strengthening transparency and ensuring Californians have access to the data insights that come from the C2C data. Our statute contemplates a public C2C research library and also charges our office with letting data requesters know whether similar studies or analyses have already been conducted with C2C data in the past. So there's a nod towards the transparency there in our statute already. Next slide. And I believe that the open science principles are really foundational to our identity as a neutral and trusted source of information. So it's just one example in the governance manual. Once the data request process is up and running, all data provider decisions, whether they say yes or no to those requests, will be made public, actually through your meetings, will be discussed in a Data and Tools Advisory Board meeting. And so our research library of results can also support transparency by lifting up all of the studies that are done with the underlying individual level data in the data system. Bottom line is that Californians should have access to the insights and analyses from our house data, and open science practices can prevent perceptions of non-neutrality. So we're really prioritizing transparency as the guiding value in how we operationalize processes for data reports and data requests. Okay, I want to close out by telling some stories here about the impact of your proposal process with the advisory boards. So back in 2024, member Diana Fong had a proposal related to CalKids. And the puzzle that we've been working to solve together with CalKids, who were added as a data provider last year, and we've been working with them over the past year. The puzzle is that many students have money for college in a College Kids account, but they don't know it. And if they don't claim that account, then the resources aren't available to use. And on the one hand, the Scholarship Investment Board, which runs CalKids, they know which students have unclaimed accounts, but they don't know which colleges those students are attending. And our partners in the higher education systems know which students are enrolled, but they don't know which students have unclaimed CalKids accounts. Next slide. So here's what we've done. C2C's linked data bridges that gap between the unclaimed CalKids accounts and college enrollment. So we can link the K-12 higher education and CalKids data together to determine which students who are currently enrolled in college have unclaimed accounts. And we've worked to have collaboration across our data providers who have both a legal agreement and a technical solution to enable this. Next slide. So initially, we've worked with the California Community College's Chancellor's Office and used that linked data. And in just the first cut of data, we identified 40,000 community college students with over $20 million in unclaimed CalKids scholarships. We shared these results with the Chancellor's Office. They already put all that information in their system called Data on Demand. So all 116 campuses have the ability to download that information and then do outreach to their students. And I'll share that just yesterday, I was at the community college's Board of Governors meeting doing a presentation about the data system and shared an update on this collaboration on the CalKids data. And the co-presenters for this item were from Southwestern College in the southern part of California. And one of their financial aid officers, Claudia Guyton, shared what they did when they sent an email to the 1,000 students at their campus who had unclaimed accounts. And then live in the meeting, she lifted up a stack of paper checks that had just come in. And she said, usually she just gets, 2 or 3 in March, and she had a stack of like 40 checks that had just arrived from the emails that they had sent out. And it was really exciting to see that. So this is a great example of linked data being used to unlock resources that students have access to. Okay, with that, I'll turn it back over to Mary Kate Cruz-Jones.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. What I'd love to do now is open it up to members. So if folks have any questions, comments, this would be a wonderful time to surface those. So members, I'd like to ask you to, raise your hands to indicate. And we have about 15 minutes. Brilliant. Member Unda, please.
I just wanted to ask Mary Kate if she could comment key pieces from the work plan, because we saw the screenshots, but because they're super small, I just wanted to get a sense from you, Marianne, what are the key things that that the office is working on this year? Just if you can name 2 or 3 things. Thank you.
I'd be happy to. And we'll also make sure we share a direct link with you so it's easy for you to find. It's on the resources page of our website. A couple of the key things on the work plan for this year. One is the continued ingestion of the data. In 2023, 8 initial data providers shared historical data with us. This month, we have 16 departments and 2 additional agencies who work with them sharing data in March. So it's been a massive expansion of the data, and one key priority is managing that continued ingestion of a larger and larger amount of data from more partners and the underlying strengthening of the data system that I mentioned with the Modern Data Stack Accelerator. So that's kind of the core work that we're doing. We will update the Student Pathways dashboard that we released last year with an additional year of data. So that will be an exciting release. We're working to develop the transfers dashboard that will be a new and different dashboard that focuses on the experience of transfer students as they navigate their way through community college and four-year colleges. And then the piloting, the build and the piloting of the secure data enclave, I would say is the other major initiative that our team is working on. In addition, the ingestion of and processing of the workforce and earnings data is going to be a major lift for our team as well to start integrating that data, linking it with all the other data, and then aiming to categorize it in buckets that can eventually lead to data tools with that data as well. So we have a lot on our plate for this year, and that's just highlighting some of the data system related things, which I'm emphasizing for you as the Data and Tools Advisory Board. Our community engagement advisory board next month, we'll hear more details, or in a few weeks, we'll hear more details about a lot of our really exciting engagement work as well. We have the 5-year anniversary of the statute passing to create our office will be this summer, and we'll be doing data walks and community data days in different parts of the state to really help people use the data. So I hope that, by the end of the year, we'll have many slides of those visualizations that people made on their own using the data and, engaging with them in communities as well. So that's a highlight, but there's much more in that work plan. Thank you for that question.
Wonderful. Thank you. Member Reed, please.
Hi, this is member Lauren Reed. I'm the Director of Impact and Evaluation at Oakland Promise in the Bay Area. Thank you so much for your presentation. That was really fascinating updates. I had two small questions. One is you talked a couple different times about the research data request process that you're working on. And I don't know if you've gotten to the point in the planning to know who at the office is reviewing those requests, like how you're preparing for that flood of requests and who will be processing those and making those decisions. That was one question I had. And then the second question for the career and technical education data that you're talking about, so tracking students who are training for technical education, are you getting data for that from universities and community colleges who have those kinds of training programs or outside of that environment or both?
Thank you for those questions. So to your first question on the research data request process, that will be Ryan Estrellato's team. The data programs team will manage the request process for studies that come in. So that is the entity, that's who on our team will be managing the process overall. To your question on who decides, so for studies with the individual level data, the authority for that resides with our data providers. So if a researcher says, I would like to do a study with the following data points from these 3 C2C data partners, then those 3 C2C data partners would need to say yes to that research study. Not all 16, right? But the 3 whose data would be used would then be the ones to approve the study. So it's think of our office as functioning sort of like the Common App. So like a student can fill out the Common App, but it's still the individual colleges that accept or reject the student. That's sort of the analogy for the research data request process. So thank you for that question. On the labor and workforce development data, thank you for that question because I'm realizing I didn't go into that in detail. So on this, some of the data we have already received from the California community colleges in particular is relevant. The new data I was talking about is coming from the 4 entities under the Labor and Workforce Development Agency. So that would be the Employment Development Department, the California Workforce Development Board, the Division of Apprenticeship Standards at the Department of Industrial Relations, and the Employment, the ETP as well. So it's the four entities under Labor and Workforce Development who are for the first time sharing their data on who is taking a workforce training job training program that receives funding that flows through them, or who's doing an apprenticeship that flows through the Division of Apprenticeship Standards. And that's the information that is now newly coming into the data system, in addition to the data that we've already received from the community colleges. So thank you for that question.
Wonderful. Thank you. Member Schmidt-Temple, please.
Cameron Schmidt Temple, Senior Education Data and Policy Analyst at XQ. Forgive me, it's a new title. Sharing this. This has been amazing. I was really, really excited about the underlying data that's been used in third-party reports. And I'm wondering, for the sake of us and the public, if there was some kind of landing spot or repository where those things are being held, maybe on the website or something like that, so we can kind of see how the data is being used. I think, eventually the goal is going to be that the data is being used so much that a repository can't hold it because it's all over the place, right? But I think for now, as it's kind of, we're in the beginning stages, if there was somewhere that we can kind of land to kind of see all the places the data is being used.
That's a really interesting idea. I'll make sure to flag that for our engagement team. Right now, what we've done, if you look at the Query Builder page, at the bottom, there's a form where we essentially say, hey, if you use this data, please tell us about it. So we'll think about, what I shared on this slide, if there's a way to make that more available. Longer term, as you say, I hope that we will get to the point where it would be literally impossible for us to show all of the amazing things that have been done with the data. That would be a great success. But I think in the longer term, the part that our office will want to make sure we're displaying as transparently as possible, especially, is anything done through the enclave that used the non-public data, right? That de-identified data. And any studies done with that we have a research library so people can see what was done with that, because that will provide really important transparency about that. And then we'll noodle on the idea of making what I put on the slide available somewhere as well. But I'll defer that question and strategy to Shannon Serrato, who leads that work. Thank you for the idea.
Pausing for a moment, but I'm not seeing any other hands. Member Mian, please.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Member Mian, coming from the city of LA, researcher and data analyst. So I really love that idea of like the learning agenda. I feel like that definitely addresses a lot of the comments that members had in the fall meeting and throughout the proposal process. So just like interested in learning a little bit more about like the genesis of that idea and like how it would be kind of like incorporated publicly. Like, is it going to be something on the website or something that folks are going to be encouraged to kind of like look at before they submit a proposal? So just like curious and interested to learn more about that.
Yeah. So be happy to share some resources. If you look at the February presentation that we had on learning agendas, there were a few linked resources, some from the federal government, some from some national organizations that just provide an overview of how learning agendas are used. And again, I think it's really it's a prioritization mechanism. So to your question of how will we use this in practice, right now it's one bullet point on a draft strategic plan. So that's a future state thing to figure out of how it would be used. I can share a few examples we discussed in February. I believe it's the state of Washington's state longitudinal data system uses a research agenda to triage data requests. So in their case, they've said, first we'll prioritize requests from the governor's office or the legislature, then requests that align with our learning agenda or research agenda, and then requests on all other topics. And so that's the way that they've managed the flow of when more requests come in than they can handle. So that's one option. Other ways that I've seen learning agendas used is, again, around making sure there's a shared purpose, especially when we're trying to do something hard or something that involves a lot of work. So again, that learning agenda that Secretary Knox sent us a year ago, we pointed back to that multiple times, even in conversations around a legal agreement or, defining which exact data points are going to be shared, to go back and say, wait a minute, if we want to be able to answer this question, we have to have these data points, or it has to be shared in this way, or we need this kind of mechanism. So I think that's where the learning agendas can really be useful as well in helping us remember when we're in the weeds, why are we doing this? And that can then guide what we're doing. One more thought on learning agendas. The Cradle-to-Career Data System Act that launched our office was in 2021. The first version of that was in 2019, and it kickstarted the planning process. That original statute actually had 6 bullet points in it with specific topics and questions that the data system was supposed to be designed to answer. Like, what's the long-term impact of higher education? What are the labor market outcomes? And those bullet points guided what was the original list of the 200 data points that should be in the data system. So again, I think it's really a mechanism to prioritize, like, what data are we ingesting? What dashboards are we doing next? What studies are we doing? Thank you for that question.
Perfect. We'll wrap it up with Member Fong as the last question for this section. Thank you.
Good morning, Member Fong, Executive Director of Braven in the Bay Area. Just wanted to congratulate the office again. The story that you shared around the Cal Kids plan and just having thousands of checks is incredible, and that data point is really incredible. It does make me wonder, how are we telling that story more broadly and like catching those moments of impact because I think we knew it, we like heard this, but it's the impact that of what this work is that makes me so grateful for this body and this entity. So yeah, would just love to hear how either we can amplify that or how we can share that story more broadly.
That's a great question. I think the specific story from Southwestern College, our engagement team will be partnering with the community colleges once the video for that is online because that was a public meeting. So we can tell that story that way, and it would be wonderful if you can lift it up. More broadly, the governor's office put out a press release about the Cal Kids collaboration with the chancellor's office. That was before yesterday's story as well. And there are a number of related things too. So the Student Aid Commission is doing some really great work in building this into their platforms for when students fill out the FAFSA or CADA. California Colleges is building this into their platform so that people can cut and paste their SSID, which is often a hurdle, and use that to claim their accounts. So there's a lot of storytelling that we can do, and I will defer that strategy to Shannon Serrato to talk about either later today or in future meetings. But I'm glad you're lifting this up because you're right. Concrete stories like this help people see the value of linking data. Linking data is like this abstract thing, like, I don't know, why would we need to link data? But when you can show a stack of checks for students, it really, tells the story in a different way. So thank you for lifting that up.
Thank you so much. Okay, let's transition into the last part of this agenda item. At the top of the day, I had mentioned that it would be in 2 parts. So this part is just an advisory board member update, so focused on you all as members. So today's meeting marks one of the final milestones in the 2025 Data and Tools Advisory Board proposal process. And we're going to hear more about that during agenda item 6. And we have a full length of time on that. So I don't need to speak too deeply to it, but we're going to hear about those wonderful feasibility study findings and uplift that draft proposal report. One story that you'll be hearing a lot today from the office, and this is actually a really good segue, thank you, Member Fong, because it connects, is the importance of these proposals, right? So Marianne just shared the impact of one of these proposals. And we're going to really pull on it in different areas. And so, members, I hope you're hearing and you're listening. But really, I'd like folks to start thinking about the proposals as, planting the seed of an idea. And later, these ideas may take root and germinate. It might not always be a linear path. It might not always be within the next month. It might take a little bit of time. But members, I just want to come from a place of gratitude to say thank you so much for engaging in our process. There's lots of you who have turned in proposals over, the course of time that you've been with us. And just my sincere appreciation for the authors that we have had in the past or this year for bravely sharing your ideas and really carefully crafting those proposals. And the public has a role in this too. So, for the folks on the line, hopefully you are interested in our public proposal process, and that's going to start to kick up in a few weeks now. So, on May 1st, all of the public proposals are due. We have some resources linked here on the website. The official form in Spanish and English will be launched on April 1st. That's when things will go live. So you'll be hearing more from us there, and I'm really excited to see what we'll have. Now, for members, you all will remember that the next time we'll see you is on July 15th, and that's when you'll have your joint meeting with community engagement. And really, the focus of this meeting will be one, y'all will have the opportunity to discuss the public proposals that we got in. The office, as a reminder, all the proposals that we receive, we put in the repository so they can have a long and healthy life there. So y'all will have a chance to discuss. And then the second opportunity is for you all to have a question and answer session with our data provider subject matter experts. And really the focus of this session is for you all to learn more about the available data points. And then therefore, from there, hopefully the goal is so that you all can have, very strong proposals when you submit them. So Executive Director Bates highlighted earlier the most feasible proposals that we receive. And again, this is something that you'll hear from us throughout the day. It's something that hopefully really resonated with you all in the fall. But the most feasible and high impact proposals are those that align with the work of the office, what we're already doing, what we're already planning to do. Member Unda pulled on that thread asking more about the work plan. Well, that's great. Really, when we get those proposals that make these connections, there's a true synergy there. So to support member ideation and preparation for the July meeting, this slide highlights several places that folks can look to kind of educate themselves further. So if you find yourself with a little bit of downtime in the springtime, wanting to avoid allergies and outdoors, feel free to dig into these tools in your toolbox, and it will truly have an impact on your proposal if you do. So I just want to, one quick note, remind folks, we have folks that have been around for 3 years, 2 years, and a few months. This process has changed a lot. We're iterating. This is common. This is normal. It's a new process. So thank you all for, working through it with us. Changes are expected. Changes are coming. We may have stabilized a bit here, but just, that reminder as we're all working through it together. And this is our first full iteration of it. Okay, brilliant. That's 2026 advisory proposal process. And what I'd like to move on to now on the brilliant, thank you, is members may recall seeing several emails from me over the course of the fall and winter months related to the governance manual committee. And so there's some key changes that emerged from those meetings. They're shown on the slide, and I'm going to unpack them now. Really, the most critical thing for you all as members is we're changing your annual or the annual recruitment cycle to every 3 years. What is also important is that the governing board, they started those conversations in May. So we're coming up on a year that these conversations started, and things really took place at the August meeting in November. So we had quite a few public meetings on this. The board approved the committee's changes that were drafted in the Governance Manual Review Committee. And again, I'll unpack those now. Next slide, please. Thank you. Perfect. Okay, so on this slide, it talks about, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. When the discussions were happening, it was really centered around 3 key goal areas. And that was, how can we make this process as effective, efficient, and engaging as possible? And so then when we were looking at what those changes could be, the governing board decided that the 3-year recruitment process would be the best. And in terms of effectiveness, the hope is that with a 3-year cohort model, It will allow our future members to have more time for relationship building, learning opportunities, shared experiences versus folks coming in at different points every single year, right? They would all come and start together and finish the cycle together. Ideally, an opportunity for more peer mentorship and collaboration. When we think about efficiency, the annual recruitment cycle created a committee that convened every year, lots of staff time, onboarding, offboarding. It was just a tremendous amount of workload for both the governing board and the office. So doing one cycle every 3 years will really help with that efficiency, especially considering the board's, the state's budget constraints. Now, in terms of engagement, and really what this slide gets to is we had heard leading up to this that it would be really great if the if this recruitment process could be in line with a student's schedule. And so really the proposed new structure, and there's some latitude here, this isn't formalized in the governance manual, is thought to mirror a student schedule so that we could really uplift a student voice. What was happening in the past is when applications were out and started, it was summer months. And so yay that they were able to enjoy spring vacation, summer vacation, but this will hopefully be in line with it. And this is actually a nod to member Curry Nunez, who is a former community engagement member and uplifted this concern many moons ago. So if we're looking at board member composition and what this can look and feel like in the coming years, basically we're going to phase into that new structure. So we have folks that are going to be falling off this summer. There's 5 of you, and there won't be any replacements. Next year, we'll have another 5 folks that will be falling off, and there won't be any replacements. So the advisory board will get skinnier and skinnier, and the 6 folks that we onboarded, you will be our shining stars in the year of 2028. And then we'll have one big new recruitment process in 2028. Okay, that was a lot of information. I want to touch quickly on the proposal process, which is my last slide here. I don't want to spend too much time unpacking it because I know I'm giving you a lot of information. But basically, what I want you all to hear is under the 3-year cohort model, advisory board members would not be able to participate in the proposal process during their 3rd year as the traditional model has been set. Because there's no new members to feed into the process. But we felt it was fair and equitable for members to still have their chance to provide proposals. So they would simply provide it via the public proposal process. Everything would remain in the repository. So it's a slight change, a slight nuance, and it's just an effect of the change. Okay, so members, that concludes my section here. What I would like to do before we get into any questions or comments, if we have any, is we have with us our governing board liaison, Ana Luz Gonzalez Vasquez, with us. Fun fact about Ana Luz actually chaired. So if you were just brought onto the board this year and you joined us in public meetings, this is a familiar face because Ana Luz was the chair and can speak with real conviction as to how much work the selection process is. And so I'd like to defer to you, Ana Luz, at the top of this if you have any comments for us and on any of this. Thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Mary Kate Group Jones. I just want to take an opportunity to really share the importance of the advisory board proposal process. Mary Kate just shared an example of how the process can really have an impact. And the value of the process is that it really sheds light into important topics that are not being brought forward by these conversations in public meetings. So I also just want to uplift the importance of aligning opportunities to really have an impact and identifying, the proposals that have that link to the strategic plan, because I think those might have the most impact. So I want to thank everyone for their important work that's being done and for really understanding that we do have budget constraints and resources constraints. It was great to read all those applications. I wish we could have accepted all of the folks that applied, but obviously we do have to work within those constraints. Thank you, members, and I'll pass it over to Mary Kate.
Brilliant. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns for us? Okay. Confirming that I'm seeing no hands raised. That's great. Let's start to get into the meat of it. So let's transition to our next agenda item, which is an unpack of the data dictionary. So without further ado, I'd love to pass it over to Ryan Estrellado, who's going to lead us through this presentation. Thank you so much, Ryan.
You're welcome, and thanks, Mary Kate. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Ryan Estrellado, Director of Data Programs and Advisory Board members. I need your advice on something on data dictionaries and a redesign that we're working on. So I'm looking forward to introducing this idea and then asking for your help on some of these concepts that we have. Today, we're going to be looking at a couple of key concepts for a redesign of the data dictionary. This is not something that is on the annual work plan, but something that is really active right now for us. And that's because when users go to our website to learn about what is in the data system, they need something there that is easy for them to understand at the level that they need to be able to see it. And so what we've seen is the data dictionary, like almost any other product that we design, has to meet the needs of multiple audiences. It might be true that we optimize for a particular audience, but it's rarely the case that one single and narrowly defined audience is a user of our product. And so, like any other product, we are trying our best to rise to the challenge of designing something that makes sense. And so today, I am going to show you a couple of concepts. These are not final products. They are illustrations of two key design concepts that we are becoming increasingly convinced are going to be important concepts for the data dictionary, but not totally convinced. Hence, we need a reaction and some advice. Those two things are going to be a README file for the data dictionary, which is going to be an introduction to the user for what they can find in the data dictionary and also some instructions for how to use it. And then an illustration of a multi-level system for a data dictionary. So something that that a user would self-select into depending on whether they need a higher level view of the data dictionary or something that's more detailed. And so we'll be showing those two things for you today. Before we go on to the next slide, I also want to mention and thank our research data specialist, Dr. Heather Daniels, who is the project lead on the data dictionary redesign and who prepared these materials for us to look at today. And I also have Heather here with us in case she can help with any questions. Okay, let's go to the data dictionary. It's true, Marianne, of course, talked about all of the data that we're bringing into the system, and definitely it has been true and continues to be true that so much of our work is about bringing that data in and then linking it. But as the data system becomes more and more built out, then I have noticed is that we have continued to and increasingly are thinking really hard also not only about importing the data, but about how to communicate it. And this is an idea that we didn't come up with on our own. Like it's on the balance of a lot of sort of public reaction and input. We can see that this is important. And I'll just give like a few examples to make that concrete. Marianne mentioned earlier that we are working on the Secure Data Enclave. And the next sort of milestone there is going to be that there will be pilot studies done with some of our partners. And of course, as we begin to look at the pilot studies and narrow that shortlist down in order for researchers to decide whether or not they can help us with that. They need to have a clear understanding of what data is in the system. That's like signal number one that it's time to like accelerate plans for the redesign. We also just get regular emails from folks out in the public, so like policymakers or researchers, advisory board members, governing board members, just wondering very specific things about what's in the data system. So even folks who have like this high level knowledge of like there's enrollment data in there, they sometimes want to know the shape of the data or the definition. That happens all the time. Um, and then I think it's really also important to point out something that we are seeing more and more, which is data and tools advisory board member proposals and community engagement advisory board member proposals from current and past years showing up and influencing the work in ways that we hadn't originally predicted. And this is, you'll hear a lot about this as kind of a theme that we are communicating a lot about. But this is another example of it is Alexis Takagi's, so from the Community Engagement Advisory Board proposal from 2024 about outreach for data literacy included a really specific reference to data dictionaries, how important they were. And this becomes part of the calculation for us about where we put our limited time and resources. We begin to see these patterns of messages. And I just think it's really important to point out, both because I want to keep us on the hook for listening, but also I want for you to I hope that you can recognize that when you speak here, the advisory board members, and when you submit proposals and you engage with us, the results of those conversations can show up in our work in really obvious ways sometimes, but in ways that sometimes we don't predict. We're seeing more and more of that. I think that's pretty cool. Okay, so let me preview now just a little bit about these two artifacts, a README file and also this multi-level model of data definitions. If you do any open science work or version control coding in GitHub, Bitbucket, and things like that, you'll understand the concept of a README file. We don't take it as literally as what you might find in a GitHub repository. We kind of think of it more broadly. It is a file that somebody who was looking at the data dictionary would go to first to have a basic understanding of what they can expect to find in the data dictionary, and then also how to use it. And we hope also will help them better understand whether or not they need level one or level two. You can think of it as a user manual in the sense that it acts as instructions, but it won't be a user manual in the sense that it's lengthy in a lot of words. In the tradition of README files, these tend to be really brief and updated as the product itself updates. So that's something we are going to ask for you to look at in a moment. I know you've already looked at it in the pre-work, but we'll be looking at it today. And then the second is a concept. We think that the data dictionary is not just a single document, but it's a system of documents. That's the theory, anyway, that we're becoming increasingly convinced of. And right now, our current version of this has two tiers or two levels. The first is for an audience that we imagine is newer to data, maybe doing more exploratory things with it, probably not doing research capital R with it, but still wanting to learn and make decisions. And Heather's design research to data sort of led us to these initial columns. It's the content area, who provides the data, what the name, like plain language name of the data element is, quarterly wages, for example, a description, how a user might see this data point, this variable used in the system. And then this part is new, but I think is going to be really important for people because I think it's an area where we really need to communicate better the status of that particular variable. So as you know, because y'all follow our work closely, we are authorized to receive a lot of different variables. Most of them we have received, and they are in the system integrated, mastered, linked. But then other ones we have received, but we're in the middle of linking it. It's a completely different status and important to folks exploring because they won't see those in the system in the products yet. And then we have others that we are authorized to receive but haven't received them yet because they're still being built out by the data providers, for example. And we want to do a better job of letting folks know where those things are in a way that they can sort of see a change over time. But that's if you are just kind of exploring generally. What if you are a researcher? I think we think that you're going to need more than this. And so that's level two. In level two, in our initial version, it's a work in progress, you'll find everything in tier one, but then we've added more based on what we have understood so far from inquiries and just talking to researchers about what a researcher or policymaker would want to know so that they can decide if the data in our system, either by way of the dashboards or the flat files or a research request, makes sense for their project. So everything from tier one, but then in addition to that, the table that the variable comes from, example values, the how far the data goes back, so the first year available, how current it is, the most recent year that we have, that's different for all of our providers depending on the domain. Governance requirements, so whether or not there are some variables that because of decisions made at the governance level can only be used for particular use cases. So of course that's going to be important to know. Other notes, and then the date of update, something that we've learned. I think we kind of knew was going to happen, but boy, we're really seeing it now. Is every year that we get data, things just change. A variable's name changes, or the definition changes, or sometimes variables just stop being collected because of decisions on the provider side. All these things kind of happen for year after year, and I think folks, if you take a moment to imagine a domain that you're like really deeply involved in, I'm near certain that you can sort of see that the sort of life of those domains change frequently enough that I think if we Cradle-to-Career aren't sharing about how that's changed over time, we're probably not giving enough information. Okay, so that's tier two. And those are the two sort of things that I know you've looked at before this meeting and have helpfully given us some initial feedback. And now I'm going to just tee up Mary Kate here, who's going to be leading you in this conversation. We'll be doing that in three parts. So part one, discussion about the README file. Part two, discussion about this concept of not a single document, but multiple documents, two in this case, for different audiences. And then the third, just sort of general feedback about data dictionaries. Before I hand it over to Mary Kate, two things I really want to share here. One is a reminder that we've been in community and co-design together now for a few years, so I think you know this already, but always worth saying what we're showing you today are not final products. In some cases, they are works in progress, but what they will always be are an illustration of the concept, whittled down to its essential parts to make it easier for you to react to. And I think that's important to say because you're going to see some parts here that if you imagine them as the final product, you'd be like, no, Ryan, please, our advice for you as a advisory board is don't release that. And like that I understand that reaction, but what we're giving you is a simplified version because we want to give you a nice focused illustration of the idea so that you can critique the idea, help us understand it. And of course, what we see in the end is directly influenced by that. So not the final product, but an illustration of the concept. That's sort of the first thing. And then the second is I'm really into this idea of this conversation not only influencing the product, but then the eventual product being a big part of community data literacy. Like, I just think that there's a real opportunity here for us to create a data dictionary that serves all the purposes of all the other data dictionaries, but is a little bit different also. It helps people learn either about us or the data gives people a chance to be in community with each other and makes it easier for folks to have conversations, not only with us, but with each other about the data. And so I really want to encourage you to think of your role as not only code designers and advice givers with us, but also as folks who are influencing what data literacy looks like at a community level through the tools that we build together. And I just think big picture, that's really important. So that's all my part for this part of the conversation. Now, the most important part is to hear from you, and I'll turn it over to Mary Kate to lead.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ryan. Very clear instructions. Hopefully you received them, members. I'm just kidding. I know you did. So we have about 10 minutes for this section. What would be really helpful, and I have a wonderful prompt here to remind me. Thank you all, members. We've talked about this. Lots of folks, the majority of you, over the majority, 94% of you completed this. So thank you. We take your feedback seriously. It's really helpful for us to refer to and call upon later. And then for members of the public, if you're with us, again, this is on our website, so feel free to reference it as we all will be doing so here and now. Lovely. Let's start that deliberation. Again, 10 minutes, so hoping to wrap by 11:35, should it all be possible. What would be really helpful from you all members now is if I could just ping, 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 get your hands, and then I can get a sense of who wants to talk. Ping, ping, ping. Those were your hands being raised. Yes. Perfect. I got 2 in. 3. Fabulous. There's the pinging. Great. We will start with you, Member Schmidt-Temple, and move down the line. Thank you.
Member Schmidt-Temple, Execute Institute. And I just want to clarify, we're starting with the README file, and we'll move into the other documents later.
That's right.
Cool. All right. So the very first piece of advice I had for this one was for the content area label in the materials that were shared. It started off with kind of a list of all of the content areas that would be there. Some of the other headers kind of have descriptions, whereas this one has the list. And I think it might actually be cleaner if this one gave a description as well of what the content, like what do you mean by content areas rather than the list of content areas. I think that might make that README file just a little bit more readable, but I also think that it update as we update the system. Sorry, we good? I had a little stop. Can y'all hear me? Okay. I think it's one less place to update as we update the system more, right? And so it's, yeah, those are kind of my initial reactions for the README file. Oh, and then sorry, one more thing I had was to add a short section that kind of explains how to navigate and use the data dictionary if there's multiple tabs that are being used, or if it's not necessarily clear to the average user, to just add some instructions, kind of like a user manual in that way.
Thank you. And I saw at least one nodding head as you were speaking, so it seems like there's other folks in the room who agree with it. What I'd also like to do too, as we're getting through member comments, is invite my colleagues Ryan and Heather. Should you need any want to ask any clarifying questions, this is a brilliant moment to do so. Doesn't mean it's our only opportunity, but feel so privileged. So Heather, in the background, I'll also allow you to talk, and you could raise your hand. Member Watson, please and thank you.
John Watson, Director Data and Impact Center at the San Diego County Office of Education. Who does not like in an evening or an afternoon, Saturday afternoon, opening a data element dictionary and just spending a couple of hours with that just content and reading, just the experience? I can't say enough. But to comment on the README, I think this transcends both the README and the prototype, but I think I should introduce it here. There were a couple of data elements that I thought would be useful to have, and one when it comes to practically using the output and putting the data that comes from the query builder to work is oftentimes one would want to set up a place to receive that data in some kind of data structure. So if I'm creating, say, a database table to take the data that comes out of Cradle to Career, one of the prerequisites for easily being able to set that up would be to have the specific data types of each of the columns. So that would be like, is it a character? Is it a number? Is it a decimal? Is it something else? And how large it is. And I know that there's probably some variation in columns. Like you may not, they may be more open-ended, but there's probably a max value for them. It's no more than 255 characters or something like that. It would just be really useful to have. I know that's more on the geeky side, but I think even the lighter experienced for those that have tier one might really appreciate that as well. That was really it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Member Unta, please.
Didn't introduce myself the first time that I spoke. Viviana Unda, I'm the Director of Institutional Research and Planning at El Camino College, Community College in Torrance, California. So, I mean, I have so much to say about this, but I'll start by first saying, just going back to what Ryan was saying, right? And what just Member Watson mentioned. Just the concept of data dictionary is really, to me, technical, right? So, and that's for previewing before the README and before the tiers. Maybe what do we do with data? This is a, guide, 101 data, how to use something in that line, in the sense of like titling in a different way, right? Data dictionary immediately to me becomes very, very technical. And then for tier one, or for those considering that we really want all Californians be able to get to use these data system, I think that is a crucial piece, that we really make our vocabulary be a little bit less technical, because in general, it happens to me all the time, just here working at the college, that people really kind of go away from data just because of the technicality of the terms. And then just to start, and I'll stop there. I think the other big piece that for me was, or key piece that for me was missing, is a data governance framework. And I don't know if this is a conversation, Ryan, that has been had, and maybe we're not just bringing it up to the advisory board just yet, or it has to do with what you were saying, illustration, and this is more complex. I'm not sure, but I just wanted to bring it up just because I have been working on data governance at my own college, and for the California community colleges, there was it was shared data governance framework coming from the chancellor's office, and that gives you like a very broad big picture about where would a data dictionary live within a data governance framework. And the reason why I'm bringing this in is because a data dictionary is one element, right? But having Cradle to Career be a data system, I think it is really important to think about either we build our own data governance framework or we pick up from others. Again, the one built by the Chancellor's Office for California Community Colleges, I think is just a good example. And I'll stop there.
Thank you for that. Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
Data governance framework can mean could mean a couple of things. Could you give an example of, like, if I had, here's the Cradle to Career data governance framework, uh, what would you as a user expect? Like, just one example of something that you would expect to open that up and see, like, oh yeah, that's what I would expect to
Can
do.
is it possible for me to share screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
Oh,
let me.
sorry, I answered for MK.
Oh,
I don't know.
I don't know.
Mary Kate,
Mary
over to you.
Kate?
I don't know if that's okay, but
We can try it.
okay.
So this is what I mean. Give me 1 second here. Here. Just wanted to bring up the page because I had it open. So that I think that I was preventing these questions. I don't know if everybody can see that.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so this is the California Community Colleges data strategy framework, and it's really more than data governance. But if you see here, and I don't know if this is big enough for everybody to see, you have, it's basically 4 areas, right? You have a data foundation area, and this is basically, it says here, data across the enterprise, structured way to provide faster access to trustworthy data. I just don't want to just give you a sense of what it is. Then we have a data management and governance piece. I think, in my opinion, the data dictionary would be part of the data foundation, okay? Then we have an insights generation. So once we have organized and we know how to manage our data, how is it that we are converting that data into actionable insights? And then the value realization, right? And what that means, how this generates better student outcomes and address system-wide needs. That's what the value realization is. So if you ask me, Ryan, about the users, I think this is extremely complex for a user, right? So I'm not even thinking about necessarily sharing something like this, but I think that us and you and the ones who work in the data system, something in this line should be a good exercise, just to, this at least helps me see, okay, what are the pieces that are missing? What are the areas that I need to work on, especially considering that this is a system-wide
That's super useful. Yeah, I see the picture now better. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. What I'd like to do is I'd like to take 2 more. So let's go through member Shack and then we'll have member Tarasova, please.
Thank you. I'm Oliver Shack, and I think a few of my comments might actually intersect with some of the other topics. So hopefully that will save a little bit of time. I think one thing, just like looking through the comments from members, is kind of the discussion around tiers and what's appropriate for different tiers. I just want to raise that, I think that there might potentially be 3 tiers even, because there's definitely like the general public, that's tier 1, and I think that's really great to have. And then there's kind of tier 2 of the more power user. I think a lot of the people kind of in this meeting fall into that. And then the third one may be more of like kind of a developer or somebody who's really, really deep into like data infrastructure. And so that information, it's less about the content, and it's more about, well, how do you link data together, and what's the schema, the names of things, all that. And then kind of related to that is that the format, the best format might be different for each tier. So tier 1, it might be like a website. Tier 2, it might be like a really long PDF, frankly. And then tier 3 might be more XML schema and things more of that nature. And so that's one kind of overarching point. And then more in terms of the content of the README or some sort of summary document. I think just having a list, like literally just a list of all the elements, can be really helpful, because often people are just searching for what's there. And then some people noted data system progress, that was it wasn't it was a little bit confusing, kind of what that means, and whether it's appropriate for tier 1. I would suggest one thing is, just especially for the general audience, is just focus on what's currently in the system, just as a matter of fact. And then, and then the other thing is, for a more technical audience, like a collection cycle, and sort of more of a general, this not element by element, but more of a general, like this is when we get this source. To the extent that cycle does exist, that can be incredibly helpful. So I'll leave it there, and thank you.
Can I just ask a quick question about the list? The idea behind the list is that we ought to expect that users would go on there and then like command F for a particular like a variable that they just know they're looking for, and they just want to know if it
Yeah,
exists on the list.
yeah. And something like one particular source that I use a lot in my day-to-day job, it's like a PDF document, and there's one page that it's like it's literally just all the. I mean, it's a smaller source, so that's
Yeah.
more possible. And then you can actually click on the name and zoom to the details about that data element. So that's
Okay.
pretty neat.
If that's public, would you mind emailing it to me?
Will do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Member Shack, you've gotten homework for yourself. Member Tarasova, please.
Thank you, Mary Kate. This is Member Tarsova, City of Roseville. I kind of want to echo Member Unda's comments. On a daily basis, I work with a lot of end users who want to get the data, but then they don't know exactly how to and like how to organize it. So definitely, I think that would be a great opportunity when the dictionary is published, the newer version, for example, for our office to host a webinar that's recorded to have a kind of guide through examples to show to the end users. And I really like ideas with the FAQs because we have different types of learners. Sometimes I do prefer having just one PDF on the website, kind of glance through what do I need, what's the directions I should be aware of once I'm perusing the data. And some people prefer it being in the kind of webinar format where there is an analyst that guides you through and kind of gives an overall understanding. So I think those would be great opportunities to be published right next to the dictionary because that was definitely a learning curve for me when I was using the data in the summer to kind of create the proposal where making those questions like what type of data it is, what are the examples. I'm very example based learner too. So if that can be included, because I have seen that other members have participated in creating kind of the data stories, that could be useful as well. Just having a one-stop shop to make sure that it's accessible for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. That was really healthy dialogue and comments. Thank you so much. I'm not seeing or hearing any clarifying questions from members. What I'd love to do now is move us to the next part of the conversation. This is helpful. We have some grounding questions in front of us. We might consolidate sections 2 and 3. Let's kind of see how timing goes. But we just did that section, or Ryan, correct me.
We kind of
We just
went
kind of
into
mixed it,
kind
right?
of went over, but I do feel like the balance and focus of what we just finished was correctly about the README. I leave it to you if we need to pivot.
Perfect.
Yeah, but
Agreed. So if folks, members, I'll defer to you. If we could pull down the slide deck, so if I could see members' faces, I'd love to spend some time on prototype if folks felt like they held comments and if people just spoke. I'm seeing nodding head. Okay, I see one hand. Brilliant. So let's okay. Bing, bing, bing. I asked for this. Okay, let's see if we could get through this in 10 minutes. I see 3 hands. So let's do member Schmidt Temple, member Reed, and then member Ortiz Villar and see where we land with this. Brilliant. Thank you.
Member Schmidt Temple XQ Institute. I'll be brief. I completely agree with Member Watson's advice that the data types are going to be really important. I think in the current iteration of what is a draft data dictionary that's on the website currently, I really do like the value display options. And so I would also include those as well. To member Tarasova's point, it also kind of provides examples of what we'll get when we get that data. So, yeah.
that's even specifically in the tier 1, the one that like.
Sorry, that was for tier 2.
Okay,
or
got it.
or 3,
Or 3.
apparently.
Okay, but on the your take is like on the more detailed,
Yeah.
like kind of wonky side. Okay, got it.
Good clarification. Member Reed, please.
Hi, Member Reed here. Thank you so much for this presentation, Ryan. And it was really fun to be able to think about, like, for me personally, like what would make this page helpful for me in my work. So that's the perspective I took. I echo a lot of the things that other members have said. I wanted to highlight in terms of tier one and tier two, and maybe tier three, I was thinking of a possible tier three a little differently, even like a tier three for folks who are interested in the research data requests. So I was almost thinking of like tier one as like general public, tier two as folks who are interested in analysis with the publicly available linked data, and then tier three for like folks who want like identifiable data, individual level data, and things like that that would require a request. That would be amazing for me personally. And then related to that, adding to the data dictionary what where data is available at what level. So is there individual level data available for that data element? And if not, at what level is it aggregated? I saw a couple members had this in their comments. Is it aggregated at the community level, city level, state level? At what level is the data aggregated? In addition to the general cycle of when it's updated, like another member mentioned, would be incredibly helpful. The last comment I have, which I'm not sure where it fits, is I was having trouble visualizing. I know this is a prototype, totally fair. How folks might decide for themselves what tier they fall into. So along the lines of a description. So when you go to the website, how does one see what tiers are available and then decide which one is right for them? So I'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Member Ortiz Viga, please.
Yeah, thank you, Member Ortiz Villar, Director of Data Strategy and Impact at Students Rising Above here in the Bay Area. Yeah, I really agree with a lot of the comments that were mentioned. I think to your point, Member Reed, I was going to mention something similarly, like not really, if folks who are really coming in as like new users to data, like how do they know which tier to approach? So even thinking about like a quick questionnaire, like 3 questions that then points you to the right link or right page where you then access that data. The other thing, and this is more to Member Shack's comments, totally agree that I'm more of a PDF girl. I want to see things kind of listed out. And so I'm looking at like the data dictionary like PDF on my screen right now. That's like the 16 pages with all the columns. Like now on the data dictionary page, like there's nowhere to like click to download. And I wish there was something like that, like something easy where I can just see all the information in one place. And then one of the columns that really stood out to me in the prototype was the usage column. And I know this is like next level and depends how it looks on the page and whether it's possible on a website. But it would be really cool to see like, I'm looking at one data point with all the descriptions, maybe as it is listed now in the data dictionary page. And I'm able to like click in to see what dashboards it's already being used in. So like thinking about like, if somebody is coming on here to ask certain questions, but maybe they only have one data point in mind, is there a way to just direct them to maybe answering those questions through the dashboards that are already built? That might be intense, or like I'm not sure how that would work on the technical side or on the website side. But just really directing folks to like there might be stuff that already exists without you having to download data yourself. We might just direct you to where that data or those questions can be answered on our website already.
That's okay. Yeah. So that's really, I just wanted to pull on that thread just a little bit to make sure that I'm following and that I'm not assuming too much. It sounds like uh that idea anticipates like a situation where a user would go onto our website and be like, "Oh, I'm going to do one of these research request things," and then they would go into the data dictionary and would be presented with the idea, conveying somehow that like You may not need the research request. That's
Right.
like a really lengthy thing. We actually have that in the dashboard, and you can download the thing, right? Is that
Yeah,
what you're
yeah.
getting
So
at?
yeah, exactly. So like
Okay.
something where in the each data point or in this overall section of those type of clusters of data, I can just see where those are actively being used right
Yeah,
now
I love it.
without having to like recreate the wheel myself as an individual kind of researcher.
Thank you.
Perfect. So I see that we now have two more hands, which is great. So what I'd like to invite us to do is let's take it in the order of Member Mian, Teresova, and then Shaq, please. And let's start there. Thanks.
Hi, Member Miyan. So thank you, Ryan, for presenting and adding like a little bit more context. And yeah, I think I would just like overall emphasize what the office has already like done time and time again with like user experience research. I think from reading all of the member comments, that's like, I mean, we are a group of users already, so like this is great feedback. But I think like that would really help with kind of helping decide whether like a complete PDF is more helpful for most users or whether there's like an ability to kind of create your own data dictionary if you're only interested in like workforce data. Not a web developer either by any means, but something like that I have seen some data dictionaries do where you can just like filter out what you're specifically interested, and then it's like less overwhelming than seeing like the whole thing, which I can see both sides. Like I prefer PDFs myself, control find, but I know that some users might want to just only, view things that they're potentially interested in. So yeah, just wanted to highlight that that's been like a really, really useful thing that I've seen the office do. Just doing pilots and doing user experience research with many different types of users has produced like very, very good tools. So thank you.
Member Teresova, thank you.
Member Tarasova, City of Roseville, I definitely want to echo the example value to be added as well, maybe even a hyperlink. I think that would be really helpful for end users. Additionally, I want to highlight that if we could potentially look at the definition of missing or null values so users can understand how the gaps in data are represented. Sometimes that is crucial when you're building a data model. And also, wanted to touch base on some categories naming. For example, data providers. Some users may not understand what this means and why it matters without any additional context, as well as like data system progress. I was feeling more so like validation or pre-validation might not be intuitive or unclear. So taking a look at the naming convention, especially for tier one end users, might be a great benefit for the understanding of overall data.
I have a quick clarifying question. Earlier, you mentioned example values and then a hyperlink. So, for what you're envisioning, if I were a user, I would see the example value. I would see that it was linked up, and then I would click on it, and then where would you expect that to go?
Member Ortiz VR would say a pathway. For example, if it's used in an existing pathway, you just hyperlink
I
into
see.
there. So you don't recreate the wheel like
Yeah.
she
Okay. So it would go to the place that we would think they would want to get that data from instead.
Exactly.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Member Shaq.
Yes, Member Shaq speaking. Yeah, I just want to, well, first of all, reinforce some things that Member Teresova and other members just mentioned that, yeah, I think the example values are just really useful and information about what values are valid versus not, just that's absolutely critical for a researcher. The one area that I kind of wanted to add, I don't think it's been discussed yet, and I wanted to add because it was in my comments, is so you're definitely going to have information about who the data provider is and what the kind of the immediate source is. But there's also a somewhat different concept of kind of like what the source of truth or the record is. Um, and that gets a little bit technical, but just to give an example, like let's say you have income in a table, well, that might be immediately reported by one of the providers, but is the source of truth, is it the tax returns? Is it the FAFSA? And that can be useful for more technical users. And I think I also want to lift that up because I think that probably involves a good deal of communication with providers about kind of how they actually feel about the data. And I think it can strengthen your processes in the longer term. Thank you.
Okay, I do see we're almost about 10 minutes behind, which is okay. So I'm going to ask the question, members Unda and Schmidt-Temple, can you all give comments, but can we have truncated comments if that doesn't feel like I'm pressing you? Please, member Unda, begin.
Thank you, Viviana, the Director of Institutional Research and Planning at El Camino College. I think members Shak and Tarasova were touching on this. I just want to reiterate it from another point of view. I'm thinking about quality and reliability, right? So limitations of the data, completeness of the data, validation of the data, just to give an example, right? Anytime that I have a member of the college asking me for students' parent data, so students who are parents in the college, I say, sure, we have it, but it's really not very much validated. This is what the students are saying. They're probably undercounted because some students don't want to say that they're parents, and so on and so forth. So something around that, because if that way, users will work with that data, understanding the limitations behind it. And sometimes when we don't have, this data is scattered, and we're making conclusions and we are making decisions or informing decisions informed by that data, that becomes a little bit delicate, basically. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Schmidt-Temple.
Member Schmidt-Temple, XQ Institute. I do want to just push back a little bit on this idea on the idea if we do have multiple tiers and there's multiple different kinds of users, that the data dictionary lives in multiple places. I think that could get really messy. I do think it's necessary that there's different tiers. However, I don't I want to be mindful of like looking for it and then saying, this isn't the one I'm looking for. I'm looking for this other one, and not being able to find that. And so just that accessibility. And then the last thing I'll say is on the row headers, I also think usage is a little bit vague. I think something like C2C tool usage is what is more so meant, and I would probably clarify that a little bit as well.
Thank you. Member Gonzalez-Vasquez.
Yeah, I'll be really quick. I think for me, something that when I was looking at the feedback, but also the tier system, the office has done such a great job of making information accessible, right? And calling it like a user, sort of like for the general public and then researcher, makes it exclusionary. Like as a general public, can I not be a researcher? Maybe thinking about the framing and saying that it's exploratory. I just want to learn about something. And then the second is more, do I have a question that I want to answer? Something that makes it really easy. Same thing with the headers, like about the data or data details. Like it doesn't have to be so technical. Data is fun. We all know this, right? And we can empower people by being able to use it. So why not frame it in how to use it as opposed to who it's for?
Great. Thank you. So our third section, I think that that's a really good place to pause on. Our third section was just generally related to data dictionaries. Now we've had a healthy conversation thus far with very specific questions. Does anybody want to just share some concluding remarks that they may have related to generally data dictionaries? That's our third bit. Okay, Member Tarasova, please.
Thank you. Member Chair Silva, City of Roseville. I just want to quickly highlight that making sure that the dictionary is easy to use and having a searchable interface that allows to quickly find the data element by name or keyword would significantly reduce the time needed to locate relevant information. And probably my most used tool whenever I'm looking up stuff. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'm hearing a bit of a pause, which is great. Thank you. So members, this doesn't have to be the end of the conversation, but it can be the pause of our conversation right here and now. Before we move on, though, I'd like to look to Ryan and Heather to just double check. Are we feeling good?
I could start, and then we'd love to hear what Heather thinks. I'm feeling great about this. This is exactly what I need from y'all, and I really appreciate it. And I also really appreciate having co-design partners who who get the concept of we're showing these sort of small parts to you in order for you to imagine. Y'all were really great about that, and I think gave us a lot of really great information. Heather and I have already been messaging on the side saying, "Oh, what if we did it this way? What if we did it this way?" The ideation has already started, which is what we needed. So thank you.
And I am a voice from beyond. I just want to say, absolutely, I agree with what Ryan just said. Thank you so much for taking the time out and giving all of the wonderful feedback that you did and participating in this process. All of it is valuable, and this process is so, so valuable. So thank you so much for all your insights and all of your work here. Thank you.
Member Unda for a concluding remark.
Just want to share can I share again, Mary Kate?
Sure.
So just want to share again, coming from Data Vista, which is part of the suite of dashboards from the California Community Colleges. This is their metric, that very technical, by the way. Just wanted to share with you, there's a lot of download options here. You have filters, and then you have here filters for the different metric type or the different categories. Then you get, you can do it by report because they have different types of report. And then it gets much more technical with the subjourney code, etc. But I just wanted to say, for somebody that has never seen a data dictionary, that's a very technical data dictionary, but it could give Ryan and the team some ideas about how to organize it and display it. And I did share with you the link in my comments. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Okay, members, this was a good start. We'll, pick your brain in the future again. So fabulous. What I'd love to do now is transition to our next agenda item, which is agenda item 5. And Shannon Serrato, who is our Director of Engagement, will be leading us through this presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary Kate, and officially good afternoon, members. We are now in the noon time part of our session. So first, I want to thank you all for letting me crash the Data and Tools Advisory Board meeting. Typically, I interface more with the Community Engagement Advisory Board, but I really want to use this time today to talk about things that are super, super relevant to the Data and Tools Advisory Board specifically. These are overarching communications and engagement efforts, but your expertise as folks who are really in the weeds, really focusing on data, are going to be crucial as we build out the work ahead. And as we talk about, right, user-centered design, y'all are users and you really understand what we're trying to achieve here. So really want to preface that this will be a divergence from, data dictionaries. We're not going to talk about rows and tables. I don't know, maybe we will, but it's not contemplated at this moment in time. So I just want to say that. And also before we dive in, I also want to follow up on a question from Member Fong about CalKits, just before we lose that thread. First, thank you for all the work that y'all have done around promoting that. We really, really are so appreciative of the work that our advisory board members do to get the word out. Additionally, we will be capitalizing beyond just promoting the video itself. This is a niche thing, so don't expect this all the time. But I actually went to high school and college with a financial aid administrator who co-presented with Mary Ann the other day. So I am 100% going to reach out to Claudia to make sure that we can better share the story of Southwestern Kids. That's my home community college as well, down south, San Diego. So I just want to make sure that we get to amplify the voices that are not typically heard. And so really excited to see all of the intersectionality of the work come together. Okay. We're already over time, so apologies that I'm just having a brief conversation with y'all, but we're going to dive into it today. Okay, so for today's conversation, we're going to focus specifically on our 5-year anniversary, really honing in on our growing data literacy efforts. And then I want to do a preview of our planned celebratory events for our 5-year anniversary, really pressure testing some of the things that we are trying to achieve, obviously acknowledging some of our limited limitations, just more broadly. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so we are excited to soon celebrate C2C's 5-year anniversary. Cradle-to-Career, as you heard, was signed into law in 2021. And as we look ahead to this milestone, we've got a lot of cool things in the works that really span across all of C2C's efforts. So we're using this moment to reflect on our existing work, projects, and processes, to iterate and improve how we engage with the public and how we're sharing information with the public. As you have just talked about, or maybe have seen, we revamped C2C's website long before a single line of data had ever been ingested into the data system, before we even had a hint of how folks were going to want to interact with and use the website's infrastructure when figuring out what data are in the data system, how they might want to engage. So as you heard, we just had a full conversation about that. We're revising our data points page as a part of our overarching data dictionary work to address just that. We heard from you all that it was really difficult to navigate, to understand what's included in the data system. So we're using this as an opportunity to improve and iterate. And we're really taking that lens to all of C2C's work, making sure that we can build upon the things that we've done together. So while this moment gives us an opportunity to look back on what we've done, we want to not only build upon, but really broaden and expand those efforts. So following the launch of C2C's first analytical tools for the public, the office is expanding our outreach and training efforts this year, focusing on data literacy through the lens of data walks and data academies as reflected in our 2025 work plan. Turning to data walks quickly, we're working closely with our community engagement advisory board members now, and we will be engaging in our C2C data walks very soon. On the screen, this is an image of our standing banner, one of the standing banners that we'll be taking around California. They are currently in the C2C office, and I'm really, really excited to share them with folks more broadly. But as I've said, we will be in Southern California next month, partnering with community engagement advisory board member Terrell Jones. We'll be conducting a data walk with the Blue Educational Foundation as part of their Black Education Congress. We're really going to be focusing on Black students in San Bernardino, and so we're excited to talk to them about their experience using the data. And we're also really hoping to capitalize our time in Southern California. We will be there the week of April. It's April 22nd is the event. We're really hoping to make sure that we can reach more audiences while we have a dedicated team in Southern California. So if you are aware of events or things coming down the pike that might lend itself nicely to the Southern California area, April 23rd or 24th, we would be really appreciative. I say that because, things happen. Mercury's in Gatorade, and we are trying really, really hard to make things work. But things happen, things come up. And so we want to be mindful that while we're super happy that folks are engaging with us, we know that not everything can land. And so this is an open invitation. If there are events that you are aware of in the next month that we might be able to kind of move from San Bernardino to another area in Southern California, we'd be glad to partner there. So I don't want to belabor the point, but just reach out if you have if you have information or things that we might be able to engage with. Okay, next slide, please. So while our data walks will foster real-time collaboration and exploration with data users, the C2C team is small. You all know this, and our ability to engage with folks around the state is really limited. And so as part of the insights gained by the data walks, the office will be developing outputs from events that will include artifacts that tell the stories of how communities are engaging with their data, such as event kits and use case studies that will provide a roadmap for others to replicate and scale similar data engagement efforts, serving as the foundation for on-demand resources that we're calling C2C's data academies. So while data walks will be a very specific type of engagement, data academies will be a suite of data literacy resources for various types of stakeholders. So for example, C2C advisory board members serve as the voices for the populations that you all serve and represent. So part of today's conversation will focus specifically on the training that you all need to go into the world to spread the word of C2C to your audiences. So to that end, we will be focusing on the trainer-trainer model, which is a CEAB member proposal. Folks have surfaced this in the past, but it's currently working through this year's iteration. So just want to amplify the synergy between the work that we're talking about today and the work that the Community Engagement Advisory Board is doing as a way to expand our scope and reach. So I like to use this part of our conversation to pressure test the type of information that you all would need with the lens, again, of data and tools specifically to talk about Cradle to Career. So this first iteration, the content will be provided very similar to our data walks. We will be providing customized presentation templates and materials. However, the engagement itself will be delivered by others, trained by the office to spread the word. But we want to make sure that folks have an ability to engage with their communities in the way that makes sense for you all. You all know how to engage and talk to your folks. So while we be offering information, it will be able to be tailored and customized for your specific audiences, your specific use cases, while still kind of following C2C's messaging guidelines. Next slide, please. So the office is working to develop resources for advisory board members as you all engage with the public. So first, I want to thank you. You all have shared so much information already before today, and I'm just grateful for your responses. It really will help shape what we do with our efforts going forward. So again, we want to use today to talk about what you need, but what we're envisioning the outputs to be will be templates, one-pagers, on-demand videos that will be packaged for you that you all can take into the field. But right now, I'm going to just focus on some information to pressure test what would be useful to you all. On the right side of your screen, this is also just a question to keep in mind. I know we don't have member deliberation for a bit. So as we are working through some of this, I would love for you to keep some questions ready to answer so that we can have a fruitful deliberation. But I'm going to work through these things on the list to make sure that this is of use to you. So if there's anything missing, anything that you would need clarity on, anything that you would want to expand upon, I'm grateful to hear that. So first, focusing on C2C's vision, mission, and values. You heard from Marianne at the start of today. These are the things that really drive C2C's work. This is the core of what we do. And so it's really important for you all as members to know what we consider to be values, what we consider to be our core work when thinking about and advising on us, how we can not only use our values and vision and mission to really advance our priorities. That'll be really, really important. We also talked a lot today about linked and available data. So making sure that you all understand the types of data providers, the data that it's currently in the data system, what is coming to the data system will be really important. We talked a lot about that today. So it sounds like that's something that we really want to make sure that's something that we can package for you all in ways that will be accessible to the public. So appreciate those thoughts already. Focusing on data privacy. Data privacy is really important to the office, but as we engage in this work, we also know that there are sensitivities around it, right? And also that people are humans first. And so as we talk about data privacy and what it means to protect people's privacy and making sure that the data are secure, that we're doing it in a human way and that you can take that information to your folks and deliver in a way that's going to feel good, that people understand, that doesn't feel wonky or standoffish. And so we're really hoping to make sure that that is something that we can share with you all. And then making sure, again, that you will have the latest information on data and tools, our new releases, what's in the data system, what's included is going to be important. And then we got a really good overview today already about the proposal process, but as it evolves, making sure that you all have the tools that you need to understand it and then communicate that back to the public as we are engaging in the public proposal process. And then finally, as the work of the office grows and expands, it's important that you all are up to date around all the cool partnerships and all the work that we're doing externally. So making sure that we can disseminate that information to you on a regular basis is the work of the office that we are committing to. So like I said, I'm glad to hear your thoughts on the information that I just shared during member deliberation. And I just want to take a moment to reflect because it's not lost to me. I started here 3.5 years ago, and I say this all the time. We had nothing. We were building the data system from the ground up. And so to be in community with you all, data experts, researchers, community champions, like you all just have such a wealth of knowledge and expertise and just like networks that we are tapping into that I'm just really appreciative of and I stand in awe of. And so just pausing to think you all for what you've done so far, and just really appreciate how you can help us spread the word. Is going to be so valuable and instrumental to the office, especially as we grow beyond our little team. Okay, so with that, I would love to round out our conversation today on C2C's 5-year anniversary, focusing on celebrations. Okay, so turning our attention to key planned events, we're really excited for this year. As we celebrate this milestone, we want to use this opportunity to lean into the engagement that really makes us great, which is ultimately our work with the people, our data providers, our stakeholders, our partners, members, the public, to celebrate the achievement of linked data together and to make sure that we can talk about this in innovative, different, and really meaningful ways. So I have a few ideas up my sleeve that I would love to talk to you all today because I have very limited to no expertise in them, but I feel like we can get to something really cool together. So I look forward to that. But really just hoping that we can talk about how we might deliver events that will not be only of use for folks, but engaging, fun, interesting, and really help us build community. So first on this list is the idea of a proposed hackathon. This is something that's come up in conversations and people get really, really excited about it. And we want to lean into how we can guide users through using the data system, the student pathways data story, the underlying files in new and innovative ways. And so thinking about how we might facilitate an interactive event with the public to increase the use and understanding of the student pathways data story is key. And the idea is that we would invite attendees to design, collaborate, and build data literacy skills and community with us is the goal to foster innovation. But again, we're limited by constraints like capacity and other things like actual time and physical space. So as we think about what we might be limited by, I would encourage us to lean into what it is that you think are absolute must-haves. What are the things that you think the office would need to deliver on to make this a must-attend event? I really want to hear those things today. So we'll open it up again for discussion shortly, but I want to amplify some things that we've already heard just to kind of spark conversation. So we talked about it today as well, but just the importance of tailoring resources specifically for this event came up. Offering simplified data dictionaries curated specifically for this event, curated data sets, and a walkthrough of the dashboards for audiences would be really important as baseline information. But beyond that, I'm curious to know what you would want to see to make this a fun event. What would make this engaging, interesting? What would bring you delight if you were going to attend a hackathon, those kinds of things? So just glad to hear those thoughts. Okay, and then the last thing, we're going to turn to our community day-to-day, which we're envisioning as a event with the public where we would connect folks across all walks of life, our data providers, our partners, people who've just been engaging with the data system, advisory board members, governing board members, state agencies to highlight the benefits of and just like the usage of this linked data system. So while folks can, hold galas and happy hours, which, I'm not opposed to, I love a happy hour. But at our core, we're really nerdy wonks who love to talk about all the cool things that we're doing together. So what better way to do it than in community and celebration? So I really love the idea of people being able to come together. You saw that slide earlier where all of the work that people are already doing with the data system is being shared. And so being able to have those folks come together to share their story about how they're making meaning out of the data is going to be really cool. And I'm looking forward to that. So before today in the staff reports drafted for this agenda item, I shared some examples of a community day-to-day from states that we have been working with and talking to for inspiration. But I also just want to be mindful that this is our first year trying to do something like this. So I also want to be realistic about what we might achieve together. So to that end, again, I'm looking to you all to provide some guidance around what elements of a community day-to-day you would want to make sure this is a must-attend event that somebody will say, wow, I can't believe California really did it. And so as we think about that, I'm going to stop talking. I really do appreciate you all being here to talk today about these things. I'm going to open it up again for now member deliberation. I'm going to turn it back to Mary Kate and just thankful for you all and glad to start the conversation.
Brilliant. Thank you, Shannon Serrato. Okay, so as mentioned, we have member deliberation contemplated in 3 parts. wanting to start in feedback on the data academies. That's the train a trainer model. That's how things are resonating with you all as members if you need additional tools. Then hoping to touch on the hackathon and then wrapping it up with the community data day. So folks of the public, if you're following along, remember that we have a feedback document with a treasure trove of information. Let's start this conversation focusing in on those data academies. Oh, brilliant, beautiful, wonderful. Nope, you're right. Thank you, Cynthia. And members, again, nod to you all. We got a wonderful completion rate on this. So thank you. Thank you for your time, thought, and effort. We really appreciate it. All right, and let's jump into it now. So members, if you want to start raising your hands, please. Member Mehta, start us off.
Hi, I'm Member Mehta from the Chino Valley Chamber of Commerce. I'm vice president there. So we are located in Southern California. So I am very excited for y'all coming out to Southern California and really reaching out to the Inland Empire, which is just, Riverside and San Bernardino counties as well. So anything that I can do, I will look at different events and look at the 23rd and 24th. But I think really we have a lot of partners here. So I really do feel like Trainer Data Academies is very vital. We are one of the lowest scores in terms of college education. And so there is, if we can really like break the silos and all work in partnerships to really help increase that, there's the GIA here, there's different organizations. And if we can all just work together to do that, I think that would be a great idea. So, and then also incorporating the business community as well, because that's something that's vital. So that's my thoughts behind it. So excited for that and really excited and congratulations for the 5-year anniversary as well.
Man, thank you. Member Terasova, please.
Member Tarasova, City of Roseville, I want to take a moment to congratulate the office on the 5-year anniversary. That a lot of work has been done. So I'm very excited to celebrate that accomplishment with the office and being on the board. And I wanted to take this moment to actually suggest including maybe surveys for end users who are attending those events to ask them how do they like our tools, because I know we have very robust conversations as a data advisory board, but also having input from the end users who are on the ground using those tools and exploring them and having the first kind of insights into them. That would be very refreshing and also potential improvements for us as well.
Thank you. Member Ortiz-Villar, please.
Yeah, Member Ortiz-Villar, with Students Rising Above here in the Bay Area. And yeah, just really excited about this work. I think part of my day job is doing data trainings and hands-on support for our staff and our community. So just very much aligned with what I am excited about and feeling true to the data practitioner side of me. With that said, I do think it would be great to have like a back to the basics training or something like how do we get folks who are not in the mix excited about this and feel like they have the language to even participate in a day like day to day? So even if it is like a I don't know, virtual session to whatever the festivities are going to be, to do like a super introductory like session or yeah, just some sort of like back to the basics about data, about C2C, something like that. And I think in addition to that, something that I think, oh, I just like lost, it just completely lost my tongue. Let me come back to it. Thank you.
No pressure. I hope we do. Okay, Member Watson, please.
I'm excited about this whole getting out into the public and introducing what Cradle-to-Career is, and the opportunity to do that at this level across the state is really exciting. As much as I think about just wanting to work with data, and that's an important part of life, it's very exciting to see people that don't necessarily work with data or don't exclusively work with data getting a chance to see what can be done, what questions can be answered. And so it would be neat to be on the sidelines of some of those events, just to see those explosions go off where somebody realizes, oh my gosh, the data is already in Cradle to Career, and I can discover this or make a decision or understand something about our students or careers. Um, I think that events having takeaways, and I'm thinking like examples. I know there's a lot mentioned about this, and there were some activities around curriculum design that have occurred over the last, I guess, half year. But I think having something that's semi-tangible, it could be electronic, but that you can be taken away, um, all in a compartmentalized set that gives you all the tools you need to do some type of exploration or answer some series of questions. And second, I it, this doesn't really, I guess, specifically intersect, but I think there are teachable units that could be developed um, by volunteers who have knowledge of Cradle to Career data and what can be done for like K-12 data science curriculum and math curriculum, statistics, let's say, maybe even higher ed, just to get the Cradle to Career brand and logo and meaning out there more to those types of audiences that are growing up in the state. Um, those are mine.
Thank you so much. And also, sorry, Member Fong, Shannon, open invitation should you need clarifying, clarifying questions. Member Fong, please.
Okay. Thank you so much. I really, really am excited about data academies. This is like the nerd in my heart is just so in love with this. I am very excited to play around with the tools. I think that first part makes sense. I also realize that the second part, in terms of helping us with the curriculum and like being able to facilitate that to the different stakeholders and the audiences might look different depending on the seniority and the level of the stakeholders. So, for example, I could be working with, you know, presidents and provosts at higher education institutions, and then being able to communicate and speak their language is going to be very different than translating it to parents or students who I'm working with. So a question that I have is, like how much of the office is going to help us in that when we translate or move into kind of facilitating outside to our stakeholders?
Yes, apologies. I went off camera because my internet's bad. But I want to make sure that I can respond to that, Member Fong. So apologies that I did not surface that in my comments, but that is something that came up a time and time and again in your written comments. The ability to make sure that we are tailoring the information not only for the types of audiences, but the level of information that those folks may have. And so just wanted to thank you for that commentary here. That is something that I have written down, underlined, highlighted as I'm thinking about this. As an aside, I think we got 56 pages worth of feedback from you all. So just thank you for that. I was in a coffee shop on Friday while I was waiting for my daughter to come out of gymnastics, and this man thought I was, studying for a bar exam. So just wanted to say I really do appreciate all of the feedback and really appreciate you, Member Fong, and others surfacing those comments that I did not get a chance to vocalize today.
What I'd like to do here is circle back. Yep. Member Ortiz-Villar, if you'd like to conclude your comment, and then we'll pause on part one, please.
Yeah, thank you for the extra time. Yeah, it came back to me, and it was in my comments too. But I think one thing that I would really enjoy doing, and I'm happy to volunteer, Shannon, if you need support, is like doing more collaboration among community-based organizations. That's who I'm here representing, and like how can they really leverage the pathways or any of the C2C tools to advocate for more funding or advocate for kind of cross collaborating across regions. That's something that, yeah, I'm just really passionate about and would love to have an input if there's a way to do that in the next few months.
Great. I love it. I love the volunteers. Thank you. Also, sometimes members, you all have shared some certain ideas, which is another way of volunteering yourself. So Thank you in advance when we knock on your door. Brilliant. Let's go to the next part of this conversation, which is around that hackathon. So, what I would like to do is, if folks feel amenable to it, I'd like to spend about 5 minutes here. Members, please raise your hands if we have any comments. Member Fong, please.
In my past life, I actually threw hackathons like all around the Bay Area. So this is a really fun and awesome idea. I also want to provide an offering that through our organization, Braven, we actually like have plugged it into our program to do hackathons for our college students. And so if the office wanted to partner with Braven to run this across multiple campuses or across a few of our campuses, or one, that we would guide you actually through that process. And it would be like a really easy partnership to get real feedback, users at the college level doing kind of that data research and like answering a question that you may have for those stakeholders too. So I think that's my offering, but this is really exciting and I love a good hackathon.
Wonderful. Thank you. Member Mian.
Hi, Member Migan, City of LA. So I mean, one of the things that stood out is just like the framing, the naming of like hackathon. So just be careful around, I would be careful around that, especially just given that it's sensitive data. So there has to be a different word out there. Maybe Member Fong, do you have like some ideas around like how else we could call this? And I think it's very similar, like just in terms of just using more inclusive language. Also not very comfortable with like data walks, right? It can be kind of ableist language or exclusionary, especially if like people can't show up in person. And this, I was reminded of this by the presentation earlier around like the student experiences and like the listening sessions. Like students do want more information about disability. There has been a lot of talk around like immigration and like what's safe to go to, what's not safe to go to. So overall, like that's what came to mind, just like how to make all of this just more inclusive for people with multiple abilities and people with different legal statuses who may or may not be comfortable attending things in person. Or even like one of the things I've seen done really well at LAUSD, like having Zooms where like people don't have to write their real names. They can, join anonymously, are still like an inviting space. So those are the things that just came to mind, just given like the current political climate and just like some of the feedback that I heard right from the student experiences survey. But overall, like super excited to share out this more and definitely looking forward to taking an active role, especially among youth, which who are the audience that I work with the most.
Wonderful. Thank you. Member Kana.
Again, I just want to thank you so much to both Ryan and the current presenters for all the work that they have done on this. This is brilliant. I just want to make my comments short because I've written whatever we need to in the space that you gave us a week back. So the one comment I do have is whether it's the trainer of trainer models or the hackathon, it would be good to keep this balance between providing information, allowing them, Shannon, to have the hands-on experience, and at the same time hearing from them, right? So, if we can divide it into those three, that would be my one overall comment. Thank you, and I'm sorry to take time over and above.
No, that's what we're here for. Thank you. I appreciate you. Member Fong, concluding comment. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to respond to Member Mion's question, and actually going back to kind of like the root of the objective of the event. Like a hackathon is fun, but typically it's to like build a prototype or like, foster something. But there's like ideathons, datathons, like a lunch and learn if it's more like informational. And so to that inclusiveness and like just thinking about the objective of what you're trying to accomplish with your idea of a hackathon is kind of like the root of the problem that I think you should address first. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I know we're at time, but I just want to respond to that because that's actually something that we came up. And so this is a really interesting problem because we have an event that we're kind of in the middle of that we haven't yet secure, so I don't want to publicly say it. So before I named it something, I was just like, oh, people want to talk about hackathon, but now I see that that's maybe not the way to talk about it. So I appreciate that. I want to give a shout out to Cynthia, who is our illustrious communications coordinator here. She actually advised that we call it a datathon. So internally, we call it a datathon. We're talking about that, really managing folks' expectations. So just acknowledging that what we consider to be a problem, you have all have identified as well. So just there's synergy there, and just want to be very clear that this is not the path forward. I was trying to think about a way that we could just have a shared baseline understanding of what I was trying to achieve, but these conversations also just illustrate how thoughtful and intentionally you are, especially as we're having these internal conversations. So again, deep appreciation to be able to have that conversation now and surface it today rather than long ways down the line, making sure that we didn't see something that could be a potential sticking point or not as inclusive. So just again, thank you all.
Super well said, Shannon. Thank you. Brilliant. If we could transition to the third part of this conversation, which is Community Data Day. Again, I'd like to get thoughts and feedback, and I would strive for us to do it in about 5 minutes. So folks could raise their hands to show their interest. I also know we've passed when we thought would be on break, so folks might need a moment, and that's okay. I'm not seeing any hands raised, and I know that that doesn't mean we don't have interest in the topic. So if it's okay with members, again, we did get your written feedback. What I'd like to do at this time is let's go for a break. It says 15 minutes. That was our initial time. How about we do 10 minutes so that we could try and stay somewhat on schedule and I'm not taking too much time from you all. Does that resonate with folks if we're back at 12:45? I see one thumbs up. I'm going to take it. 12:45, I'll see you all back. Cameras off, muted. Bye. Get started again. Wonderful. Members, welcome back. Thank you. It's 12:46 p.m. What I'd like to do is remind you all, please, in this next section of the meeting, to try and speak as clearly and slowly as you can, as we do have interpreters on the line. What I'd like to do now is transition us into our next agenda item, which is agenda item 6. And this is where we're going to really dig into the proposal report and those feasibility study findings. And what I'd love to do at this time is to pass it over to Ana Luz, our governing board liaison, to start our presentation here.
Great.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Mary Kate. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Ana Luz Gonzalez Vasquez, and I'm the governing board liaison to the Data and Tools Advisory Board. I'm really excited to be here, and I have really enjoyed everyone's feedback on the data dictionary and also on the 5th year anniversary, and congratulations to the office for their 5th year anniversary. As Mary Kate shared, agenda item 6 has 2 parts. In part 1, we will be taking a micro level approach, narrowing in on each proposal, the feasibility study findings and proposal updates. During part 2, we will take a more macro level approach, analyzing the draft report on the 4 proposals and contemplating any additions or clarifications that should be made as a result of the findings presented in part 1 of this presentation. Okay, we go on to the next slide. As members will recall, at the October meeting, members received a presentation on all of the submitted proposals and had the difficult task of deliberating on which had the greatest potential for success and impact. Since then, several key steps have taken place. The office conducted a light touch feasibility study on the 4 proposals, and I also had the opportunity to work with Member Shook and Member Mian to develop the draft proposal report, which we'll hear more about in part 2. During today's meeting, members will discuss both the feasibility study findings and the draft proposal report. Okay. Now I would like to ask Ryan Estrellado, Director of Data Programs, to begin his section of the presentation.
Thank you, Member Gonzalez Vasquez for setting us up here. I am happy to get us started on this. I want to start by just talking about the concept of a light touch feasibility study. This won't be the first time, of course, that you will have heard of this, but it is still relatively new for us and very different from the way that we responded to proposals in the first year. And I think the thing to notice here about light touch feasibility studies is that we are doing them for every proposal now. And we feel like that's a good way to really hear all the things that are important from you, but also you from representatives of the community, and then to be able to give that to the governing board. So covering more ground was the goal. But the necessary trade-off for that is whereas in the first year we would only do three but go really, really deep, uh, now in this new and improved procedure, we are doing all of them, but are doing our best to estimate the factors that we think at a high level go into, what we think of as the overall feasibility of and value of a proposed idea. The two sort of main uh, high level metrics that we look at, as you'll see in the report, are the cost either in terms of time or in dollars. And then also the value, which is not the same as saying the value of the idea because all of them are good and important. But what we estimate we could get out of the output of the idea if we decided to do it. And that includes things like how much of the data already exists? Is it already being collected? If it is being collected, how certain is it to the best that we know? Are there a lot of gaps there that could lead to situations where if we executed on an idea, we wouldn't have a whole lot of confidence that what we're seeing in the data is, should be used to make decisions, those kinds of questions. But I'll just repeat here that I think the important thing is that these are our best initial estimates because we know that when we present this to the governing board, that they'll have a chance to sort of look at that and be thinking about it this year and also in future years. And at any given point, if they want to prioritize an idea or a part of an idea, that they would very likely take the next step of asking us to go really, really deep and starting to look at, say, for example, if there are staff needs, how many we would need to hire, the actual dollar amount, more specific and quantifiable metrics about the certainty of data and that type of thing. So you won't see that in this round. Um, and uh, I just think it's important to note that. But what you will see is coverage of all the proposals, which is really great. Before I go on to the next slide, I'll just say really quickly here that the structure of each of these reports, we tried to keep them as uniform as possible. And trying something new this year, up at the top, summary statement of our estimate of cost, but also estimate of value, which again, not the same as saying whether or not it's an important idea. They are all important, but what we think the output would represent if we built it. And then you'll see then below that a more careful explanation of the rationale for how we got there. Also, as you know, especially if you were a proposer, you had a chance to do a briefing with the office, but then also had a chance to submit ahead of this meeting another document that either revises or expresses opinions or clarifies things that are now attached to the proposal on the website. So the kind of the complete package of the proposals, the initial proposal, and then that kind of follow-up documentation. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about the member proposal workbook. This is a new process, or is new. We started it kind of mid-cycle last year. And whereas before we would plan to go into the May governing board meetings and for there to be an up-down vote on each of the three uh, proposals that we selected for a feasibility study. That's the old way. We don't do it that way anymore. Now, there is not a required vote in May. And there's also, as you know, not a required vote for which ones we do proposals, feasibility studies for, because we do them for all of them. But what that means is that while we are not focused on an up-down vote, what we are focused now on is discussion, hearing particularly discussion amongst y'all, and then synthesis of that discussion with the help of Member Gonzalez Vasquez into top-level themes that can then be given to the governing board for them to consider. And for that to happen really well, of course, we need discussion today. Similarly, the way we spent the first half of our meeting benefiting from you engaging us and each other, we will also have that time to do that today. An important tool for this discussion, something that Mary Kate and Stephanie put together for y'all to make that experience more positive and productive, is the member workbook. There are two parts to the member workbook. You see a screenshot here, and it's in your materials. The first is your own individual reflections, and those are used for conversation. And then what becomes the sort of aggregate of those individual reflections, both for you, but then across all members in the big picture reflection part. So that's the workbook, important tool for the discussion we're going to be having today. Next slide, please. Okay. I want to say something here that I sort of pointed to earlier, but I want to say it again because I think this is something really special that we're experiencing that is so hard to predict. Yeah, I've been here, I think, for 3 years now. I was the only person on the data programs team. I did the first run of feasibility studies with David and Kathy. They looked very different back then. But the way that we knew the proposal process back then was very literal. There were proposals, and then you either did the proposals or you didn't do the proposals. And, I think that was the best that we could do given the instructions that we had. But fortunately, we've done this 3 times now. And something I think is really special that we've learned is that this is so much more than whether or not a project gets realized in a year that it's proposed. That is a very obvious potential benefit there. But the other thing that we've noticed too is every time an advisory board member proposes something, it leads to a discussion that becomes a seed for future things. And those future things can be anything. It could be another proposal. We see that in the case of the teacher data proposal, that you have these kind of proposals that sort of piggybacking off of each other as the landscape of teacher data and interest in it sort of changes or evolves. There are a couple of cases we've already mentioned, like Member Fong's uh, seed planted about CalKids, and how that influenced the way we thought about a project that actually became a real project and is now getting a lot of attention for a lot of good reasons because of the benefit for kids. But also Member Takagi's focus on outreach in general, but then the role of a data dictionary in outreach. So these are all, and those aren't even all the examples, but I think what we're seeing here as a theme is the more that we talk and have this conversation publicly, the more those seeds are just kind of spread out everywhere. And as the policy landscape changes, I really believe life will come to those seeds in ways that could be obvious, but in other ways could be positively surprising in a good way. And so I really encourage for us to think of that. It's really hard to tell the time horizon on which we can see some of this stuff come to life. But I do appreciate that people submit their ideas because it is one of the best proxies that we have about what's important to the community. Okay, so Kathy is going to help us for this next part, which is the conversation about the proposals themselves. Kathy is a project director of economic mobility, post-secondary, and workforce systems from WestEd. We all know Kathy by now, and she'll be helping us facilitate the member deliberation today. I'll also be here to answer any questions if needed. And with that, I'd like to hand the mic over to Kathy to get us started.
Thank you so much, Ryan. So as you see up on your screen, there were 4 questions for individual reflection in the packets that you had beforehand. So we're going to take about 20 minutes, and this is a chance for you to sort of ask your questions or voice aloud your wonderings as you were looking at both the original proposal, the light touch feasibility study, and the update. So what I thought I would do is just go sort of a round robin for each of the different proposals to make sure that we've got time for each. So if there's a question or a statement you want to make, just use the raise your hand function. And why don't we start with teacher data? Yes, member Ortiz VR.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. Good to see you again. Yeah, I was really excited to see the feasibility studies for the proposals that I was not engaged with. And particularly for this one, I have one question regarding the data availability in the feasibility study. There was a note about if teachers went to training programs outside of the state, we would not have access to that information. But I'm wondering where the National Student Clearinghouse data comes into play for that. Like, is there a way with that new partnership to get some of that data in the future, and kind of fill that gap if we were to kind of connect data from teacher programs outside of the state?
Kathy, I can
Ryan.
help with that one if that's helpful. Yeah. So the first thing to know about that is the way we would track whether or not somebody was training to be a teacher is what boils down to like a yes no variable in a higher ed segment data set that says like in teacher training program, yes or no. At present, and there are probably other proxies for that. That's kind of like the most direct way to measure it. At present, that kind of variable only exists in the CSU data. And so that's based on what we see in the data, but also in our communication with CSU and also the CTC. That's something that we're constantly being reminded about because essentially, if we look at this idea, this construct of in teacher training, at present, you're looking at CSU. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't analyze it, but it means that's like necessary context for the types of conclusions that you can draw from it. Now, on the question of out of state, we do have a partnership with NSC. We are constrained to the variables that NSC sends back to us in a match. And at present, enrollment in a teacher program is not one of those variables. So we do have a partnership, but it doesn't directly solve that problem for out of state attendance. As I said, I think there are probably creative ways to do proxies and things like that, but those would not be nearly as certain as an actual variable that says in teacher program, yes or no.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Member Shack.
Hello, Member Shack speaking. And I think I have 2 questions on this proposal. One is that, so option 2, I think really seems like a critical piece to know, to have more information about the relationship between outcomes and teachers and workforce preparation. My I think my main question on option 2 is compared to like the status quo, wouldn't presumably researchers already be able to apply to have access to answer these questions? And I'm just wondering, what's sort of the difference? Uh, what does option 2 really entail? Would it be like a higher priority topic? So proposals to research that topic would be given higher priority. What would that look like? And then the second question, which I think is kind of related, is I'm curious, do you have any thoughts on kind of pre-calculation of metrics for researchers that you're collaborating with? Do you see the office actually providing like recommended metrics, set of metrics versus, or collaborating to calculate those metrics versus just providing kind of more the raw the raw elements, and then the researchers calculate them.
Brian, I have to turn back to you because these are both policy questions about prioritizing requests and
Yep.
then creating data structures.
Yep. I'll take the data structure one for data structure slash definition one first. So there's another proposal here that's about college promise, and I think there's sort of a parallel kind of question there. Um, I think the main thing to say is uh, we're mostly learning as we go what our sort of position on this is, but I think the default position right now is we try to be as neutral as possible on the definitions of a metric, especially if they are meant to be used as, say, proxies for really important research questions, and especially if they are currently used metrics for things like funding and stuff like that. Our default position tends to be we should not be the authority on definitions like that. Now, we also think, though, that we're in a real special position to convene the right kinds of voices to have those conversations. Um, and while ultimately I think it's sort of case by case, I think mostly what I think we'll see is us not taking a position on what the right metric should be, um, and instead sort of getting the right people in the room to be able to talk about it. I can imagine that there are going to be more sort of flexible metrics, lower stakes than funding and stuff like that, where maybe we might have some ideas about and opinions about the reliability of particular metrics versus others and stuff like that. But the default position tends to be let's get the right people talking about it. We've got the data in the system, and I think having a like a public venue for consensus around things probably makes more sense versus us saying we think definition A is the correct way. Oh, and then you had another question about prioritization. Yeah, I mean, I think the way we see this with feasibility studies is we look at what is proposed in a study and then we compare it to the balance of opinions that have been given to us by folks like the advisory boards, but also other stakeholders, and we do our best to sort of match that against what folks have asked for before and what we sort of know. We have a lot of researchers on our team who sort of keep up with that type of thing. And we try to get an overall feeling of like, yeah, this is a topic right now that a lot of people are asking questions about. And that is a real kind of like a starting way for us to give a recommendation about what we would prioritize over others. But then that's not the only factor. I mean, I think there are some things that we ought to prioritize based on the feasibility of the output themselves. So another way of saying that is there might be a high priority topic, but if we don't have the data to produce output that we could have confidence with, then that just might not be the right sort of like if it's too kind of vague or has too much uncertainty in it, we might suggest prioritizing something that is a less hot topic, but has more certainty in the data itself. So it's really a lot of things that kind of play into it. And I know that that's kind of a non-answer, but I think it's the real answer.
And just one quick follow-up.
Yep.
So I think what I'm hearing is that the feasibility study and that option contained in there is kind of that's sort of one data point. And if this board says, that option's really important to have, it's kind of one data point overall in your process and in figuring out research applications.
Yeah, I think that's right. Taking direction from the board, next step, then it would fall on us to say like, okay, here's what I think we need to be able to here's what we would need to understand better about that particular concept in terms of cost, neutrality, et cetera, at a deeper level than in the light touch feasibility studies that we could then go back to the board with and say like, here's what I think we're looking at if you want us to do this.
Thanks, Ryan. I want to flag that we're burning through our time pretty fast.
Sorry.
So no. Member Fung and Member Mian will be next, and then we're going to move to the next topic. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I just had a clarification question based on what you said and then follow up. Currently, Ryan, you said that the data that we collect, that based on all of our data providers, the only institution that can provide teacher program participation is the CSU system, and we can't get that data anywhere else.
Yeah, I'd revise that a little bit by saying there's no variable for that in other higher ed institutions. Specifically, there's no like community college or UC one that says participates in teacher training, yes or no. That only exists that explicitly in the CSE one.
Um, First, wow. And then two, I have obviously in the nonprofit world, affiliated with, Teach for America and KIP and all of these charter schools that operate in kind of to the option two of the constituency, right? Like the communities that are low income or under-resourced. And some of these charter programs have created alternative pathways outside of, the CSU system, et cetera, for teacher completion. And so the question that I have is, has there been any existing or coordinated conversations with some of these charter school networks to get some of that data? For example, Teach for America in Bay Area, they partner with Loyola Marymount University. And then KIP, they partner with the Alder Graduate School. But if there is a way to broker that, I think that will really help us get a clear picture of some of the teacher data, placement data too, because they're already working in those communities that we care about.
Yeah, to be open to hearing more.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take Member Unda and then we're going to move on to the next topic. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, was I given the yes, I
Yes,
was given
yes,
the
yes.
floor. Thank you, Viviana Unda from El Camino College. I think I have a clarification question. I'm not sure if I understood correctly. So there's two options for this study, and from the feasibility study, I understand that option number one would be the one most aligned with priorities for California. My question is, can we do option one and not option two? Do we have to do both? Because at least from the clarifications that the author of this proposal was doing, I understood that it was that needed to be both. And I tend to think that option two has more value anyhow. But Ryan, I don't know if Ryan, anybody can help me to understand that.
Yeah, I think I'm going to turn that one, if you don't mind, Kathy, turn that one over to you. I think you're in a better position to explain the distinction between the two.
Absolutely. So option one was to change an already planned dashboard to include additional variables. Option two was to prioritize doing research that wouldn't necessarily put that information into the public domain through a dashboard. So Member Contenzuite did say that she thought that both were important. I mean, you all can make whatever recommendation that you want to the governing board to sort of indicate what you think is most important. And they're going to take that under to consideration when they're thinking about the limited capacity of staff for implementation. All right, I'm going to move us on to the second proposal, which was the College Promise programs. Are there any clarifying questions that you have about that proposal? Go ahead.
Hi, Member Mian. Kind of going back to the option. So maybe I misunderstood it, but I think the way that I read it, and especially the responses, the pattern was that authors kind of chose all of the above. So I was a little bit unclear behind like what is the intention behind like demarcating the different options? Is it going from like more feasible to less feasible? Because that seemed to be the pattern, right? Of like the responses are like, I want everything, which I commend, everyone for like, yes, like that everything is important, but then it goes back to the conversations, right, that we've had all day around prioritization, around like the learning plan and like how to align with like the capacity of the office and overall like the strategic plan. So just curious to learn a little bit more about the design behind the options.
I think that the effort was to try to come up with something that felt very tangible and specific that would allow the governing board to evaluate how to direct the assets of the office. So we did try to go simplest to hardest to basically give people a sense of what was possible. My experience watching this particular advisory board over the last couple of years is you tend to be a let's try it all group across different cohorts. And so I think the thing that is important is to remember that you're working within constraints And so going back to Ryan's note that there are things that maybe didn't get acted on by the board in that immediate cycle, but did change the evolution of the work. You all are welcome to prioritize everything, but it may be easier for the board to assess how you and your professional expertise understand what could make an impact as they're trying to make difficult choices about resources. Any other questions about College Promise? Yes, Member Unda.
Viviana Unda from El Camino College. The feasibility study says that this one in particular would involve a significant cost. That's how it is described. And there's not detail enough for me to understand what it means, a significant cost. Would you be able to give a little bit more detail about that? Thank you.
Yes, this is a project that there is the least available to quickly implement. So we start with the fact that there are many, many different definitions of college promise that would need to be aligned, that even for the metric that the office had hoped to create, the data don't appear to exist to be able to get that information in place, which means that you'd have to actually, and the cost really comes when everybody getting together, agreeing what the definition should be, amending their statewide data sets, amending the data collection practice at every single LEA and college in the state, and then getting that information up and go. It usually takes about 3 years when you create a data element to get really clean data. So there's a cost to this that goes across every single level. It's not just the office. But as the authors say, if we're investing a lot of money as a state level, perhaps that is a cost that is worth bearing. And that's why there's also several options here for different strategies that could help the state answer that question. Member Shack.
Member Shack speaking. I think one question that I still have open is so, and you just covered it, is on if you're looking to have individual level data, the feasibility study that you said that you would need to basically you would need to have agreements from every LEA, which means every school district. And that seems like a monumental lift. But I would like to hear more about sort of how did you, it may seem obvious, but like how did you arrive at that conclusion that that is what's required? And then the second, and then kind of related to that, are there certain LEA, like how many LEAs do you think are actually relevant to this? Or like could you achieve through a relatively finite number, like 90% coverage, something like that?
Well, it depends entirely on what kind of college promise program you mean. So, I mean, this is the problem that you might have a high school. Let's go back to the origins of the Long Beach promise, that there's not necessarily a way that those high schools are saying, these are the students that we have tagged that are going to be in this effort. You have an issue of like, there is data about the college promise grants that are part of the community college infrastructure. So that might be easier to get to. But what we were understanding from the proposers is that you have high schools that have no idea what happens to their students once they move on. And so you'd have to flag who they were. And that was part of what drove option 2, was the idea that you could do a ground game where you could go to the major LEAs that were implementing programs and figure out who those students were and interject that into the analytical data set so you could find where they went. But we simply, you can, like an institution might say, we have a college promise program, but you have no idea who in that institution is participating currently. Member Fong.
Yeah, I know that it seems pretty gnarly of a project, but just looking at the California College Promise Program, AB 19 or AB 2, if you just think about the amount of money that California has like funded towards this, it was $46 million in 2018 and 2019, and then it increased to $85 million in the fall of 2019. And so just like think about all of that money that our state has already spent. And the fact that we can't even track the data of where our students are is a little bit absurd. And so for me, it's always been following the money. You've seen that consistently with my proposals. And I know it's hard and I know it's like just a gnarly, gnarly project, but I appreciate, Kathy and the team for taking a look into it. And yeah, we want it all, I guess.
Okay, one last comment from member Ortiz-Villar.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we are have been in the mix for this proposal a little bit more and just been in what I heard recently, like living in the question of where this data lives and like how do we get folks to feel like prompted to care that this data should be collected. And so really just want to highlight like the spirit of our amendment was really like in the spirit of what has been shared today, that like these proposals are catalysts for future conversations. And if this is what this proposal will be this year, like great. And like, yeah, can we push the data providers to actually prioritize this given what Member Fong just said? And so just want to hopefully like lean on you all as our peers to like see that this is again like very important for us to like elevate and keep in the governing board report that they read so that we can motivate the data providers to maybe prioritize this sooner than later. Thank you.
Thank you. We are almost out of time for this segment. So what I want to do is open it up. And if you have any questions that are really clarifying questions, as opposed to like from someone who didn't put the proposal in, related to either the homeless status or the high school outcomes data extract, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, questions are right now.
I have a comment about the data extract one, but I just want to put a pin in that and see if any of the members want to go first.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, so
Oh, wait, Member Watson just put up a
go ahead,
slide, so
John.
let's go ahead and do with that.
I just want to clarify, are we asking questions about the feasibility study pro and con, or
This is really just to figure out what questions that people had to support the deliberation you'll do in the next portion.
okay, thank you. All right.
Yeah, I wanted to weigh in here and say that earlier at the start, I had talked about the pros and cons of this sort of approach, with the major pro being we cover everything. But that's at the cost of some limitation of like how deep we can go. We've experienced that, and I think that's just a necessary sort of part of this. It's not necessarily bad. In fact, I think it's more important that we can cover everything than it is to do a really, really deep dive. But something that I'm trying to work on conveying is the parts of feasibility that are harder to see beyond only just cost and the value of the output. And I think there's a little bit of that happening with the LEA extract one that I just want to go on the record and say is that when we read that one and looked into it, you'll see that there's a rating of relatively just like reasonable cost, I think is what we called it, high value. But there is also something different about that one, which is there's alignment with a kind of like a genre of effort and project that we're already working on, which is I would loosely describe as like we are trying to see how we can generate CSV files that is both legally compliant, do it the right way, secure, private, of course, but have those promote the work of our partners. So you see that in CalKids, the CalKids reports, and also some of the work that we are doing, public report work that we are doing with CSAC for their dashboards and also their mandatory reporting. And the LEA extract proposal is not exactly like that, but there is a natural alignment with overall momentum at the office to do projects like that. We've been thinking really hard about how all of that works, both on a technology side, workflow part of it, also the legal part, and what the participation agreement says. And I just want to say that out loud because it's a little bit so far. It has been hard to kind of find a way to sort of say that in a feasibility study, where it's an iterative process. I think next year will say that a little bit better, but it's kind of we're like learning that. And so I just wanted to go on the record and say that was a thing that we all kind of looked at and we're like, yeah, that makes that one a little bit different from the others in ways that are maybe a little bit harder to explain in the report itself. So just wanted to say that out loud, and happy to take questions about that if you have any.
Member Shack, I see your hand raised.
Member Shack speaking. Just a very quick question about the expanding homelessness element. So in the feasibility study, it said it near the beginning, language about possibly bringing in match data from HDIS, from BC SA. But it said in one of the sentences that there would be direction from the governing board for that to be integrated into the 2027 work plan. And just a process question of, does that mean that that is a required action for that step to be made, or could that still happen just from staff at Cradle-to-Career deciding that that's an important area to cover? Just a little bit more clarification on the process, because I know not just me, but community members who are listening to this, that's a question they're going to have is what do those future steps look like?
Yeah, I could respond to that. And I know Kathy, you've got some detail on this too, but what that paragraph expresses is what it would look like and an estimate of the timeline of what that would like should the board decide, oh, hey, this is something we should propose, or we should pursue. So I think the main takeaway there is anytime we're doing some kind of partnership, bringing new data, that like the fastest version of what that would look like is the board voting on it, and then the next year would be spent preparing the file specs, and also, by the way, all the sort of legal things that have to happen to do that, and then the data import window following the execution of all of that stuff would be when we first see that data. So it's Kathy, if I'm saying any of that wrong, please correct me, but that paragraph is expressing like what that sort of workflow is and reasonable expectation of timeline, and not necessarily expressing that that is something that will happen this May. That ultimately is up to the board to discuss.
And also, I think it's really important to flag that the office doesn't just say, oh, I would like to have some data from this agency, and that they can go grab it. That generally it is that agency coming to the governing board saying, we would like to be part of this data system. And so that really is a necessary first step. And that is where the board approval comes in. And so this happened with another department within the Health and Human Service Agency that came to CTC and said, we would like to be part of this. And the board agreed. And then the work proceeded as Ryan described. Okay, I know that Mary Kate is being very kind. We've gone 6 minutes over on this. So what we're going to do now is transition to part two. So Ana Luz Gonzalez Vasquez is going to give us a presentation about the report.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kathy. So like I stated earlier, I will be presenting part two of the agenda item with member Shook and member Mian. Part two will be a presentation of the draft proposal, which I worked with member Shook and member Mian. It was really great to be able to get to know them and work on this report. The report summarizes the discussion from the meeting and the member deliberation. As you know, you had an opportunity to review the report in advance of today's meeting. So today's big question will be, given the results of the feasibility study findings and your discussion now, does this change any feedback that you all would want to, that you all gave in the fall? Members will have plenty of time to discuss this further. I'd like to now invite member Shook and member Mian to join me in our presentation. If we can watch the next slide, please. I'll just give a brief overview of what we're proposing today. The next slide, please. So we're going to review high-level review of the 4 proposals presented at the October 3rd meeting, and highlight similarities across the proposals, as well as differences, and key considerations for each proposal. So now I'll pass it over to member Mian so that he can share a little bit more about each of the proposals.
Thanks so much. Next slide, please. I'll quickly go over this one. It's just a proposal list. So we've been talking about it, so we can skip this one in the interest of time. So in terms of the similarities that we noted across all of the proposals, and this was really informed by the conversations that we had, a transcript of the meeting, and then the proposals themselves, we noted that all address equity issues, especially among vulnerable populations, and they aim to support and track student success. All the proposals also focus on outcomes and the examination of gaps and inequities. So there's really this highlights the alignment between, student and teacher and career pathways data. So that kind of a gap in understanding is there. The proposals also underscore the unique role of C2C in uniting disparate data sources and systems, something we've heard throughout the day, while also emphasizing the need for common definitions across the state, right? So we kind of just also mention about like the role of C2C in being a convener, but also and sometimes supporting the definition of some measures or variables. We noted that the teacher workforce data and student homelessness data are urgent issues following the COVID-19 pandemic, since they represent pressing social problems that require immediate attention. So this really stood out, right, from member comments in the fall, something that's like an immediate need and something that's been brought up not only by the public, but also by members in terms of like social problems in the state of California. So next slide, please. In terms of differences across the proposals, noted we sectioned this off into like kind of themes. One was like the time horizon and the availability of data. So really thinking about the need to balance like short-term wins versus long-term system improvements. Some proposals use existing data more towards like the near-term implementation, while others would require like new elements and full like P20W integration. So representing more of a long-term effort. Um, and just clear distinction was needed between 1 year and 5 year priorities. So kind of aligning not only with like the work plan, but also thinking overall about the 5 year strategic plan. So kind of differences in there across some of the proposals. In terms of the level of specificity, the teacher workforce and student homeless proposals provide like detailed data collection plans because they're focused on introducing existing or new data. And the specificity supports policy relevance and timely reporting. Um, Moving on out to like scope and implementation work for the post high school outcomes and workforce uses aggregate data and it's primarily design and reporting work, whereas the college promise is focused on defining and standardizing a concept. So it's a more conceptual effort. Lastly, for teacher workforce, it really crosses like multiple education domains. So this broader scope, because it's kind of like touching different institutions and different types of institutions, could increase the complexity. So now I'll pass it over to Member Shuk.
Thank you, Dan. So I'm going to have 3 slides talking about the considerations. The first 2 proposals will include the teacher workforce and student homelessness data. Major headers, why it matters now. Teacher workforce data complements the student data. It highlights investment needs for supporting students and educators. There's strong urgency in the California context and more immediate priority than proposals that are better than for the 5 year horizon. Some key considerations and concerns for these 2 proposals. For the teacher workforce, there's uncertainty about using the CTC versus the CDE data around teacher assignment. There's also concern about leaving this determination solely to C2C. And then the 4th bullet, questions about data reliability, including inconsistent methods for identifying housing insecurity. Next slide, please. This slide talks about enhancing college promise definition. The role of C2C raises questions about whether C2C should define and compare program types, concern about setting a precedence for conducting analysis for users versus enabling user-driven analysis, the authority and responsibility. Some of this was mentioned. We wrote this just to note independent of the feasibility reports. So some of this may overlap. Authority and responsibility, uncertainty about the C2C's authority to create definitions. Some believe metrics should be determined through expert input, proposals, or partnerships, and at the same time, strong support for C2C for promoting trusted data and consistent definitions to ensure transparency and accountability. And then I think I have one more slide. Next slide, please.
And then this one is considerations for the post-high school student pathway, higher education and workforce outcomes data extract. Key themes, elevating certain data, audience and complexity. First bullet, data elements are already available in the P20W data system and align with its mission. It raises concerns over why this data extract is prioritized over others. Clear decisions about which metrics to include and who the intended audience are necessary. And if the goal is to integrate additional data partners and enhance understanding of student pathways, proposals like this, particularly those feasible within a 12-month timeframe, could be prioritized. And next slide, please. And I'll pass it back over to Member Gonzalez Vasquez.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that Member Shirk about us not having any access to the feasibility studies, because there's quite a bit of overlap in some of the things that we just shared. Now really thinking about big picture, if members have any questions on our presentation, we are available to answer those questions during the member deliberation. And just a reminder, member deliberation will focus on these two questions. Given the results of the light touch feasibility study findings, how does this change the feedback in the proposal report? And in thinking about the light touch feasibility study findings and the annual work plan, how does this change the recommendations in the proposal report? Okay, can we move on to the next slide? So following today's meeting, I will work with Member Shook and Member Mian to update the proposal report to incorporate the feedback that's discussed today and key ideas from today's discussion. The final proposal report will be presented to the governing board in May for their review and discussion. There will be no board vote at this time. The board may use the report to guide future discussions, including during the approval of the annual work plan at the August board meeting. So I'm going to stop there at this time and pass it over to Kathy so that she can lead the deliberation.
Okay, so we've got another 20 minutes. And the goal here is for you to give input about additions or changes that you'd like to see to the report in its extract. So I'm going to go in reverse order this time to make sure we've got more time for each proposal. So I'm going to start with the high school outcomes data extract. Anything you'd like to see changed or amended in the report? Yes, Member Ortiz-Villar.
Yeah, I think in my reflection, this did feel kind of to Ryan's point, as the most feasible and like the easiest, kind of aligned with the work plan. I do appreciate the question in the report that our peers just presented around like why this prioritize versus other entities maybe having specialized reports that are automated or like prioritized in this type of way. So that is something that I hadn't thought about, and just yeah, I like that you all posed that question and had a little bit of a pushback to just ponder on and keep thinking about. But I do think this is the most aligned, so I appreciate that came out of the feasibility study that maybe wasn't called out as much before.
Member Watson.
Yeah, I guess I appreciate all the work that's been done in each of the proposals, and there's so much work still ahead of us to try to successfully reach these goals that everybody's expressed. I think with respect to the high school data, post high school data, this looms large for me because I work in K-12, and we really don't have currently readily accessible data that tells the story of what happens to students after they leave high school. Now, I know the system, Cradle-to-Career, has this vast linked data set, and that a lot of the questions that we have, even with suppression, could be answered with the data as it stands right now. So there's not, again, and this was said in the proposal, the data already exists, and there's an appetite and a need for it, both within the K-12 environment and nonprofits seeking to answer questions, and researchers also trying to understand what happens to students, what pathways do they choose, what industry segments are popular. So I wanted to say that I am intrigued by the statement about the P20W system, and there may be there may be uh, potential for both the cradle to career side with this proposal and whatever's envisioned for the P20 system to be able to, which I believe relies on the same data, to be able to uh, provide a broader availability of data that we're looking for. Anyway, I appreciate the time everyone spent on the reviews and the feasibility studies, and look forward to being able to pursue these proposals as best possible.
Member Khanna.
Thank you so much. Again, thank you for the work. I definitely do appreciate this proposal in particular because having worked for all those years with San Francisco Unified, I saw that we used to get the data from NSC and we would give it to our schools. And they were so appreciative in terms of their both advocacy as well as, having some appreciation about what happens to their students once they graduate. Also, I see even in today's discussion, it was mentioned that within your learning agenda, one of the goals is long-term impact on higher education. So I'm just seeing there to be so much alignment between your capacity and prioritization. So I'm all support for this program.
Thank you. Member Shack.
Thank you, Member Shack speaking. Just one question you could add and pose in the report is whether maybe a nominal fee should be charged for such an extract, or whether it's possible for Cradle to Career to do that. Because sort of at the heart of this in my mind is that it could potentially save districts and partners from retrieving data from National Student Clearinghouse. And if there's savings from that, perhaps that should be shared with the broader data community. It's just a question to pose.
Member Tarasova.
Member Tarasova, City of Roseville. Thank you so much for everyone who reviewed the proposal. I really appreciate the time that our members took to pose those important questions. And I guess I wanted to provide some clarification onto the reasoning why certain data points were selected for our proposal, which was literally just the availability. We tried to include as much stuff as we could and to make it a meaningful report and something that we have seen across sections. I from the workforce, as well as Dr. Watson from the K-12 perspective, and as well as we both share the experience in the higher ed. Also, we tried to align it with a Governor Newsom idea around the career passport. So that will be an elevated topic. And I think C2C is uniquely positioned into answering those questions on how to we make sure that younger generations have the access to the higher paying jobs, fulfilling jobs, and how do they get there with that data. So thank you.
Member Unda.
Diana Unda, El Camino College. I think this is something that it would be useful for governing board members. Say a little bit more. It's so difficult to compare each of these studies. Each of these studies, the level of complexity is just so big, and they're all good. They all should be done. So to me, it would be helpful. For example, I tend to go into the college promise because I see the amount being involved in that and that no data whatsoever to assess what's happening with those monies, right? This one is very, very interesting to me. My question is, could we include, or my suggestion is, could we include something about the impact of the data being available? What kind of questions would the public or K-12 respond if this would be done? And the same, because I have all the questions that I could respond with the college promise one. So to me, that would be useful to have a section for each of these four. What are the kind of questions? What are the kind of challenges that we would be able to overcome, or we would be able to start working through if this would be developed, basically? Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move us on to the homeless status proposal. Are there any recommendations about changes to this portion of the report? Yes, Member Yi?
Yeah, member Yi here at UC Irvine. Yeah, something that I thought was really great that was brought up in the report by the other members is like the definition of narrow and specificity for the definition of homelessness. So I was interested in, I know it's like in the report it said it was just a definition that was already listed. So I was wondering if there was like more information about who kind of has the authority on like that definition.
So you mean the data that's currently being reported to C2C?
Yeah.
So that's coming from a couple of different sources. So it's coming from the K-12s, it's coming from the community colleges, and it's coming from financial aid. And in each case, the definition is slightly different from each other. And that has to do with the reason that they're collecting data. So for financial aid, they're asking, are you at risk of homelessness? Because they're really trying to understand the need of people that could prevent them from enrolling. Whereas in the CDE sense, the K-12, it's much more they're just trying to deal with compliance, figuring out kids that are in urgent risk. The homelessness flag for community colleges is a self-reported data point if an individual chooses to disclose that. So this is just an example of how data collection has grown organically across different agencies for different reasons. And one of the fun parts of building a linked data set is it's a chance to get clear on the differences between them.
Thanks.
Any other questions on homelessness before we go to College Promise? Okay, any additions or changes you want to make to the report related to the College Promise portion? Yes, Member Ortiz VR.
Yeah, this is more a question, I think, coming up from Mary Ann's talk earlier about the learning agendas. And even in my own reflection, like I hear everybody saying, right, like this is a more 5-year concept, but how do we kind of start the conversation now and push the providers to do something and try to do something sooner than later. But on that note, like if it's not aligned with the work plan this year, if it's not aligned with the strategic plan that's being developed per se, like how does then this get prioritized ever? Is learning agendas like maybe a new way for that to happen? Just curious, like what's the thought of kind of thought process for from the office on like how learning agendas could help proposals kind of stay alive or conversations to stay alive. So yeah, just a thought on yeah, how do we like name that if that is a new thing that we're exploring?
Ryan, you want to take that?
Yeah, the learning agenda concept is still new for us, so difficult for me to operationalize in sort of reality what that could look like in terms of like saying, here's the steps that you would take, here's the process you would take. But putting that aside, I think it's totally appropriate to look at that as a way that we would um, uh, collect information and interest that would drive all kinds of different work, including what proposals sort of get looked at and talked about. And the reason why I think that is because we already see less formal versions of that happening. So we don't at the moment have a fully executed vision for a learning agenda as it exists in the way that Marianne talked about it. But we do have what I talked about earlier, which is like genres of work that come from a lot of different input and sort of momentum going through the office about how we can do things differently. And that is a less sort of formal way for us to identify different focuses that when we receive proposals, they get seen against that context and inform feasibility in some way. The example, I think the perfect example we've all been talking about here is just that little bit of difference that makes the LEA extract one just a little bit different because of its alignment with existing momentum. And I think in theory, the learning agendas could act as maybe a more formal way to do that. Look, if there's an established learning agenda around a particular topic and then other topics come up, it then would make sense for proposals that better align with that learning agenda to be ones that the office and the governing board looks at. So all of that to say, we'll see how the learning agendas develop as a process, but in general, I think it's appropriate to look at that as a thing that, whether it's College Promise or something else, brings like a really informed focus to what the office picks and chooses to do, or maybe more specifically, what the governing board directs the office to do.
Yeah, that's helpful. I think just a short follow-up. Like, I'm fearful, and maybe this is maybe from a pessimistic mindset, but you all can call me out on that, and that's okay. But I am fearful of like proposals get done, there is no internal momentum, and then what then, right? Like we're now in another 5-year work plan, and so like, how do we like keep the momentum going when yeah, folks are going to be kind of coming in and out, but anyways, yeah, in conclusion, like how do we get the momentum going? And if learning agendas could be that pathway, like really excited for that. And if not, yeah, how do we keep the momentum going more formally? So appreciate your context.
I'd like to make an observation, just having been involved with the initial planning for the data system. Like in the beginning, everyone was casting the widest possible net, and the group that was trying to inform whether there'd be a research agenda flat out refused. They were like, how could we pick when everyone in the world wants access to this data set? So it's understandable that we're 5 years in and people are finally like, okay, maybe we actually have to make some decisions. It's going to be a lot easier, I think, to serve on this board when you know the direction the data system's headed, because then you can give targeted input in the way you could about the data dictionary. We all know that the website is not meeting people's needs. Some of the work that we did with you all was because the website made information difficult for you to understand, who are among the more engaged researchers. So I think that the discussions you're having here and maybe highlighting this in the report is a way for the board to contemplate ways that they can best leverage your expertise as they go forward. Member Unda.
Yeah, I'll just continue pushing for the college proms. I just I mean, I understand that that there is this thing about mapping things to the working plan, mapping things to the 5-year strategic plan. I also think that we, as an advisory board, it would be really appreciated if we communicate in some way to the governing board that maybe sometimes it's not the easiest and it's not the one that aligns better with what we're doing, but the one that is more significant, the one that will have more impact. This one is mapped to so much money, and we don't have a way to assess what's going on there. In my work on the planning side, on strategic planning, this is the typical piece that is not done anywhere. I have millions of examples about how we don't close the loop, right? We implement something, we get the data, we inform that, we plan, we implement, and then we have no idea if that thing worked or not because we don't assess. And to me, this is one of those examples. Okay, we are investing an important amount of dollars there and we have no clue. So I just want to rescue the words of the own authors that were saying, let's make this the beginning of a definition process. Of course, it won't, it's just so complex and it means such an amount of coordination. And I think that Cradle to Career could be that that agent of coordinating the efforts among these multiple entities and agencies that are involved in defining better the college promise program. I'm gonna finish there.
Wonderful. Member Shaq.
Member Shack speaking. I think one way forward on this is to say, as we report out, that a guiding principle should be that Cradle to Career plays a positive role in getting us closer to a common definition. And we really need from this conversation, it's become really clear to me that you can't do much if you can't answer basic questions about, which schools, which programs, and that just has to be resolved. And then sort of the second point, and it's responding a little bit to Ortiz VR about like, well, what do we do with this is, I think this might be an area where there's a bit of an intersection between data improvement and engagement. And I think, thinking about the scope of Cradle to Career, I think it is within scope of saying, this is something we want to lift up, learn more about student experiences in these programs, learn more about what these college promise looks like, what are the components, and just continuing, I think, in the immediate future, continuing that drumbeat of like, this is a gap, help us. We need whatever that help looks like is yet to be determined, but we need that, and just keep on pushing it. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to close out with the teacher data portion of the report. Any comments or suggestions for that section? Okay, I know we had a pretty rigorous discussion in the first portion on it. So I think that comes to the conclusion of the time that we had for questions and comments. Any final words before we close out this section? All right, I appreciate the care with which you've looked at these reports and proposals. So with that, I'll turn it back to Mary Kate.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, folks. That was, as Kathy Booth just said, a really deliberative session, so I appreciate you all. I know that there's 5 minutes until 2 o'clock. Folks are probably looking at their clock and thinking the same thing. So what I'd love to do is very quickly run us through agenda item 7, because I just want to take a moment to thank you all for your engagement and the things that you've done to promote the work of Cradle to Career. And then after that, we'll have public comment and we'll adjourn. So I want to set folks up to let you know, set your expectations. We might be a little bit after 2 p.m. and it was worth it. We had lots of time with Data Dictionary. None of your time got cut from proposal talk. So let's jump into this here. All right, next slide, please. So I just wanted to take a moment and thank our authors, right? At the beginning of this meeting, when we had our member update, I shared, it takes some bravery to come out and share the proposals. We had some public proposals adopted. We had some new and original ideas. So the 6 folks on the screen today, I just want to say thank you. Y'all put your ideas and your thoughts out there. They might be seeds that will germinate this year, next year. You all have been talking about maybe a 5-year stretch. That's beautiful, lovely. And I really appreciate the conversations that are starting to take place around that. So thank you all. We really appreciate it. Next, I would love to thank Tina and Danny and Annalise, who were the authors. We just heard them present. I know it was a tremendous amount of work, a tremendous lift. Yes, yes, brilliant. Thank you so much. We'll hear from them again. They'll take the information from today, spruce it up, and then we'll hear from them again at the May 20th governing board meeting. So these are your spokespeople. Thank you so much for just doing a tremendous job and condensing the 4 proposals and that deliberative conversation from fall. Next, I'd like to thank these folks here. Now, we have lots of public meetings. We have committee meetings, we have governing board meetings, we have advisory board meetings, and we also have community conversations. And so I just want to thank the folks that we see on this screen because they showed up to one of our public meetings, public conversations. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to listen in, to be with us in community. It wasn't lost on us. And just want to say thank you for that. The last place is our virtual bulletin board. So you all remember that I ask you all for events. I want to say thank you to members Watson, Chook, and Unda that helped us populate the events here. So lean on your networks. Hopefully you'll see each other at these events. And just wanted to uplift those there. So thank you so, so much. Any questions, comments for us? We're feeling good. All right, maybe we could end a little bit earlier. Let's move on to the next agenda item, which is general public comment. So folks, I already saw a hand shot up. I have no speaker slips here in Sacramento, and folks have been waiting all day to share with us. So I'd love to turn it over to Stephanie Gutierrez Valdez, my colleague, to lead us through public comment at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Kate. For all members attending via Zoom, please raise your hand at this time so we can get an accurate count of how many folks on the line are interested. Okay, I see 2 raised hands, and I'm going to take it in the order that I see. Okay, Lisa Shu, I have permitted you to speak. Your 2 minutes starts now.
Hi, please just chime in if you can't hear me, but I want to say good afternoon, advisory board members, CTC staff, and colleagues. My name is Lisa Chu. Here speaking on behalf of the Data for the People Coalition. Our coalition includes advocates, educators, students, families, and community members who believe data should be used to advance educational and social equity across California. Regarding the advisory proposals under Agenda Item 6, we strongly support 3 proposals before you today. First, we support strengthening teacher workforce data and appreciate the office's finding that this can be done at a reasonable cost with high value. We support adding data on teacher assignments, misassignments, vacancies, demographics, and whether educators received state grants. Including these data in the teacher training and retention dashboard would help connect teachers, teacher preparation to filling high need positions. We also support making these data available to authorized researchers so they can examine how teacher preparation and placement relates to student outcomes. Second, we strongly support clarifying and strengthening the definition of college promise programs. With more than 100 promise programs across California, many established before AB 19, students benefit from a wide range of financial and non-financial supports. A clear shared definition is essential to accurately track participation and outcomes, identify effective program models, and scale strategies that close those equity gaps. Third, we strongly support expanding student homelessness data. Housing insecurity remains a major barrier to educational success, yet current data are fragmented and incomplete. We support leveraging existing data to identify whether a student has experienced homelessness and exploring partnerships with the business, consumer services, and housing agencies to incorporate data from the integration system. Thank you so much.
Okay, at this time I see Angela Estrada with your hand raised. I have permitted you to speak. Your 2 minutes starts now.
Hi, Data and Tools Advisory Board. Thank you so much. My name is Angela Estrada, and I'm here representing public advocates as well as the California Affordable Student Housing Coalition. We formally support the Data and Tools proposal expanding student homeless status data element submitted by Member Shack be addressed through the 3rd option listed in the feasibility study. This would include a number of homelessness data points from HDIS. The CASH Coalition is a coalition of civil rights, advocacy, and student-led organizations committed to ensuring equitable access to higher education, and we find solutions to housing insecurity and homelessness. Expanding the student homeless data element to include a number of homeless data points from HDIS would allow for visibility to the housing challenges that students are experiencing instead of a siloed perspective on just one service or knowing if a student did experience homelessness or not. It would be helpful to know if housing insecurity or services accessed supported that student. It would provide a more comprehensive and longitudinal picture of student homelessness and housing insecurity beyond simply knowing if a student had just utilized one housing resource. We want to know how different programs support or fail to support students. Additionally, the data will highlight the successes and limitations of current housing support services. So with these considerations, the Public Advocates and California Affordable Student Housing Coalition asked that the data and tools proposal be addressed through option 3, which is including a number of homeless status data points from HJS. Thank you so much.
All right. Apologies. All right, I see no other raised hands on the Zoom. I'm going to hand it back to Mary Kate Cruz-Jones to end on adjournment.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, members, we've gotten to the end of our meeting. Thank you so much. We had lots of contributions today, both public and from members, both written and verbally. We appreciate the time and effort to get us here. Just as a quick reminder, if anybody wants to tune into community engagement, we'll be hosting those folks on April 8th. Then we'll have a strategic planning committee on the 29th at noon. We all know that you can join us virtually on Zoom if you'd like to. And then we'll have the governing board meeting on May 20th. Y'all will convene again on July 15th. Your calendars should be marked. For some of you, this is your last meeting. And so we'll celebrate at that time. Not celebrate that folks are leaving, but that it's the end of your era. I don't know. That I'm trying to make it sound positive. Hopefully, folks take it that way. Brilliant. Wonderful. Well, I'll see you all soon. This concludes the meeting. It's 2:04 p.m. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.